Brennen Beckwith labels victims of abuse blind and media illiterate. So, Brennen Beckwith, he, they, a, was someone who was targeted by Calvin Gower, a very nasty and abusive truthscum. Recently he came back and he started sharing his side of the story and started getting a lot of traction along with a lot of Galvin's other victims, and really started growing their social media presence and talking about social issues. However, recently Brennan decided it was a good idea to use his platform to encourage sympathy for Natalie Wynn of ContraPoints. Now, those who have followed this channel for a while know my many issues with Natalie. I believe I summed it up best on Twitter with, quote, "To those trivializing my issues with Nat, at its core, I'm a victim of domestic abuse who has to constantly live with her content. The content of someone who declared those criticizing public acts of domestic abuse to be secret Nazis shoved in my face. And it's not like I just see it, but it's the best. It's so progressive, and it's helping countless people to do what? Avoid accountability for their actions? To target and harass her critics? She's created herself a private little army by utilizing reactionary rhetoric. Do you know what it's like to enter trans or leftist spaces as someone who went through that, only to be told I not only have to tolerate but accept Natalie's open worship of a known domestic abuser, else she feels excluded? That's sick and twisted. It really is." End quote. If you'd like to see exactly what that is reference to, it's reference to the whole Buck Angel situation surrounding opulence and later cancelling. I've put together a video which is linked in the agenda down below, and that video goes over Buck Angel's domestic abuse, how Natalie knowingly lied about Buck Angel's abuse, how she openly declared she worships him and looks up to him as this hero of hers, and just pretty much goes through all these arguments. But the thing is, as a victim of domestic abuse, we're not the only sort of people that Natalie has harmed throughout all of this. She's harmed the Jewish community by selling merchandise with anti-Semitic memes. Interestingly enough, I don't see many people connecting the facts that people celebrate Natalie for de-radicalizing Nazis. Those Nazis become, ex-Nazis supposedly, become part of her audience, only to then have her offer them anti-Semitic merchandise. People don't really seem to connect that. We of course have Buck Angel's MB-phobia and the way Natalie Wynn likes to target any trans person who doesn't necessarily conform to stereotypical ideas of femininity or masculinity, respectively. We also have the victims of Buck Angel's pyramid schemes and similar cons. And then there's the racism. And it's with that racism, that's one of the things that I wanted to bring Seth on to talk about, because I noticed he was discussing Natalie's racism in relation to what later happened with Brennan. So, Seth, if you'd like to take the floor and discuss your experience with Natalie Wynn, you have the mic.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to kind of just give a little bit of background. I am mixed race. I am Black and Southeast Asian. Both of these come up in like the harassment I end up experiencing as a result of ContraPoints being just kind of racist on main. That's the issue. But the original, like my original critique was her racism before even the Buck Angel situation happened, before the pronoun circles happened, and calling herself an elder queer or whatever, or elder trans or something like ridiculous stuff happened. I used to watch her videos. There were some things that were red flaggy, like I really didn't like that she dresses up as the Freya character, which is literally a Nazi costume with an iron cross. I think that's not necessary to call that stuff out. But what really, really made me just hard drop her videos was her cultural appropriation video, which just a note, she has taken that stuff down because, you know, the video and I guess audio, you know, these are pre-transitions, so, you know, she's made it clear she doesn't want that that stuff available. Like, she doesn't want people looking at that. She doesn't want that part of her online stuff. I think we should respect that. She has absolutely posted the transcripts for the video, so, you know, that's, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I have not heard an apology for some of the really bizarre shit that went down in that video. And yeah, so the gist of the video is, you know, one of those sort of anti-identity politics, you know, you've got bigger issues, don't worry about cultural appropriation type of videos. She does this entirely in Sugar Skull, Day of the Dead outfit, full face paint, you know, roses on her head, and just this whole look, right? So you can kind of tell what side of the debate she's immediately positioning herself on. And if it's cool with you all, I'd like to look at the transcript and, you know, read some quotes from it.
Yes.
And I want to be clear. Sorry. I want to be clear. I want to be clear here. I want to be clear that I'm bringing this up because it left a bad taste in my mouth. It absolutely does characterize how I perceive her later stuff. It's, you know, I'm not, you know, one of those, whatever, she thinks that we're conspiracy theorists and that we dig up archived news articles or something. You know, I'm bringing this up because I was watching it when it was up, and it pissed me off when it was up, and it pisses me off now. So yeah. Yeah, so she introduces the video, like she does that style that she does where she pretends to take an issue seriously and be like, yeah, obviously, you know, this is a really complicated and nuanced topic. That's why I want to start by saying that cultural appropriation is always wrong and immoral. And then it's like record scratch reveals her costume for the video. And then she goes on to say that Halloween costumes are often presented as one of the main examples of cultural appropriation, specifically whites. For some reason, whites is italicized in the transcripts. Don't know why. Who think it's okay to go to parties dressed as a, and I quote, a Chinaman, an Indian, señoritas picantes, a Jew, or a black. Really interesting choice of framing. Basically, never call someone a black. Don't refer to black people like that. Let alone all the other stuff in that sentence. You know, she goes on to say that her problem with that is that it's racial stereotyping, not that it's cultural appropriation. So, you know, she doesn't elaborate, but like, would it be then okay if you wore a Halloween costume that wasn't stereotyped, that was like, you know, an authentic looking outfit? She doesn't really get into that. Oh yeah, she actually opens the video. The first sentence is, oh God, all right, so I know you're thinking, oh God, the last thing I want to watch is another video about cultural appropriation, especially one by some sissy cracker. I can't stand it anymore. Like, that's how she imagines her critics, viewing her as a quote unquote sissy cracker. It's incredibly awkward. It's incredibly weird to open a video like that.
That's the thing.
Like,
she's teaching her audience how to see her critics. That's what she does. She like baits them. She feeds them. So when someone does criticize, that's what they see, because that's what she's taught. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah, exactly. And you know what? When we're being taught to view critics this way, and you employ terms like sissy cracker, like, who do you think she imagines is talking like? Who are you supposed to imagine is talking like that? Probably not a white person. Right? So. And
there's also, I'm realizing there's also a really uncomfortable link there with, like, the image of this person who's saying this is black, and they also using the word sissy, which can be seen as very derogatory by a lot of people. So it's almost linking black vernacular with homophobia, or sort of a black person being behind homophobia. There's also that. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. The idea of, as much as people want to say, like, oh, let's, Black trans lives matter, it's like, there's the default is assumed that Black people are going to be transphobic rather, and, also other people of color that, that plays into Orientalism a lot, that white people are really the only ones who have this advanced view of, being progressive and being queer, being trans, and having just, that capable of
It's the
having these
equation of
experiences.
advanced socially and culturally with being Western.
Yeah. Just funny because, in the older days before Western culture started, being somewhat positive to the idea of queer people, it was the opposite. It was, you're going to stereotype the Middle East as overly sexual and gender nonconforming and all of these things. It's funny how that flips.
I've seen the the colonial travel things in magazines. I would travel magazines for colonialism, and they're complaining about how gay things are in the Middle East, about how they see two men kissing and all that, and they can't stand it. As white people writing back home. So yeah. But anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I could go, I could definitely go into that. But yeah, that's something that persisted for a long time. There was also a lot of Western gay men would do sex tourism, stuff like that.
Yeah.
In the Middle East, there's a really, I've definitely is the sort of stuff that I've been getting into this year with my academic life. But yeah, so, just leveraging that. Again, I don't know what the visuals were because I'm only looking at the transcript. There's some things about the video that I do remember. There's some things that I don't. So yeah. Yeah, and she's she gets into that, and she gets into a surface refutation of people who, the basic, I think you could be a little conservative and be somewhat offended by someone dressing up as a racial stereotype, right? If that's you tossing us a little crumb, if that's you tossing us a little tossing us a bone on that, then that is an extremely low bar. And that's how it seems like she's using it here.
It's the racist version of, I don't care what they do in their bedrooms. Okay, but we're talking about violence against gay people in public, or, equality laws, etc. Yeah, but I just don't care what they do in their bedroom. Okay, that's not even a base standard, It's such a small thing that's throwing to you to make them seem progressive.
Yeah, exactly. To sort of concern troll, really, to say, look, I'm reasonable. I'm willing to listen to your complaints. Something that comes up a lot, that ContraPoint still does, that Brennen was doing, that a lot of people in, the breadtooth circle that we're not supposed to say is a thing. They do that. That's a very common tactic. Yeah. Faux progressivism, and then consistently undercutting those points. Yeah, and she goes on to talk about how she used to have dreads, and it's not really just for the record, it's locks, not dreadlocks. Kind of, that's a smaller issue with this. If you're talking about white people with dreadlocks, it's less of an issue. But yeah, so she talks about, oh yeah, here so she goes on about how she used to have dreadlocks, and she says, so first of all, I'll say that for the 2 years I had dreads, I got nothing but compliments from Black people. In fact, it was the white people who couldn't fucking stand them. But I acknowledge that it could be a sampling error. And, she sort of throws a bone to maybe Black people didn't want to approach her. Where it's okay, so why would you say that? That if you acknowledge that, then why are you framing it like my Black friends think it's totally fine for me to do my hair like this?
It's almost like society, through its repeated microaggression and mistreatment of Black folks, has taught them that if they try to challenge a white person on something like dreads, etc., that's going to be turned against them. It's going to be turned into a Darvo. Oh, you're making an issue out of nothing. You're making all Black people look bad, sort of thing. The whole respectability politics that you sort of get into there. Yeah.
Yeah, and when this association of saying that any criticism is actually coming from white people, not people of color, that has roots. That was an old tactic. Say that the civil rights movement in the U.S. was stirred up by white communists. Because black people aren't capable of actually having political thought, of having criticism, and an aside, it gets brought up in the Lindsay Ellis video that this is mostly white people, not actually
Same
Asians
thing
who are
happened
mad.
with Black Lives Matter and like how they were framing things during the protests. Oh, this is like white and drug users very often like try presenting it.
Yeah.
White college students, etc. Yeah, sorry.
It's amazing. At the same time, they'll still code their critics as
Yeah.
black in a lot of the things. So it's not consistent. It's very hypocritical, and it's nonsense. But it provides cover, and that's what it's designed to.
Reactionary rhetoric doesn't have to be consistent. They don't care about consistency. They care about having the best argument for the moment, and they'll completely undermine themselves like 10 seconds later. It's the same for like the gender critical crowd who like shows image, like says, oh well, trans women are upholding patriarchy by conforming to feminine stereotypes, and then they'll post a photo of someone like Danielle Moscato before she started transitioning as like, this person is going to be in your bathroom, look at the beard. Graham Lincoln famously used to just scream beard at any person he thought was a trans woman. So it's like that contradiction. They don't care. It's just everything goes out the window.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's amazing how abusers have the same set of tactics. It's like textbook shit.
I think that they're so
no matter
versatile,
who they are.
the methods, and like they've been honed over millennia to like prey on like prejudices and ignorance and emotion and all this. Like they've been honed right in, so they're incredible tools if you want to get away with something. So
And she sort of acknowledged, like she positions one of the viewpoints as it's bad for white people to have dreads because some people argue that it's a Rasta thing, so the spiritual religious connection means that that makes it bad, you shouldn't appropriate it. Like I think we can talk about hairstyles and how they're connected to like religions, but like that doesn't mean it's the exclusive use of that. So that's kind of a weird argument. I don't think that people who are arguing that think that's the sole reason why it's bad. So that seems a bit like cherry picking.
Yeah, that is. I know one of the reasons is because, of course, it has tribal, like different hairstyles have different histories, and then of course they were targeted with violence, and they're still targeted with violence. Like when this conversation was going on, I remember there was like a very viral video like 4 years back of a white college student who got called out. And people were pointing out that like black students today are still being like physically assaulted by teachers who cut their hair. Black hair is demonized. They're not allowed to wear these styles, yet a white person, like people will go to the ends of the earth to defend them for it.
And she does sort of get into that, and she thinks later in the video she sort of says, oh, but that's a good thing, we should like use that for good, and how white people are with dreadlocks are so good at like rebelling. It's like a progressive hairstyle, so like it's like, oh, trying to twist that into a good thing instead of just clear boundaries have been set, don't do this, you're violating it. Like it's really just that simple. I don't think it has to be a deep hundreds of years old tradition for us to say like, no, you can't, don't do that, please. Right? It's very simple. She goes on, and hold on, is it even mainly a Rasta thing for black people? Like, how well versed is Lil Wayne in the teachings of Haile Selassie? I guess he does a Jamaican accent sometimes. Is it appropriation when black Americans do Caribbean accents? And then brackets, I honestly have no idea. I'm going to wait for black people to figure it out. And then she goes ahead to say, and I'm very sorry for my pronunciation, I'm not Jamaican, She goes on to say, Wagwan YouTube. And that's like a Jamaican, like what's going on? Right? So why would you bring up this gotcha? Does that make it appropriation if in this case, and then just like go and use that language yourself? Like, what are you doing? You know? Um, and yeah, and she gets into the like, oh, like she acknowledges that white people can get away with it, but then she turns it into like, oh, we should use this power to normalize it, which that was like debunked heavily, responded to heavily by the time she made this video. Everyone knows that that's not how that works. It's nobody's asking you to wear like white dreads in order to normalize black hairstyles. Like, no, that was never requested. So why is that even being discussed? You know, there's a bunch of weird rambling bullshit about the British invasion, about how Led Zeppelin, you know, was inspired by black musicians. This weird crap that is, in my opinion, completely irrelevant and pointless. And, you know, there's a lot of that sort of filler. Then she goes on to say that, you know, she disagrees with the view held by some SJWs, because that was a term that was normal to use, that white people shouldn't borrow things from other cultures. For one thing, I think this idea depends on Wagnerian, cum Hitlerian ideas tethering culture to race. In reality, like, there are no clear boundaries between black music and white music. You know, kind of just like goes on like, you know, if we tell you not to wear white dreads, that's Hitler.
If you acknowledge that, like, there's different ethnic groups, cultural heritage, you know, that's the real racism.
Yeah.
Yikes.
It's I don't see race bullshit. Yeah, so, you know, kind of goes on a bit more, and basically, like, she makes a bunch of weird comments about quote unquote miscegenation. She makes some like one comment towards the end is it might be time to dial down the offense taking a little bit and embrace cultural miscegenation like the cucks we are. What I'm really trying to say here is I like watching black men bang my wife. Like, what the fuck?
Like, that's just outright sexualization of black bodies.
And for people who don't know what miscegenation means, that means race mixing. It's you know, let's mix the cultures. So like,
so that also isn't there a thing of black men have experienced a lot of violence because of white men imagining that black men are going after their white wives. So that's really insensitive.
That was part of the argument for the civil rights, like against the civil rights movement. You know, for segregation.
That was the primary justification for lynching.
White and black together, black men will target white women.
And I'm pretty sure this is before Contra came out and transitioned this video. So like that's.
I think ContraPoints. I don't know, but in the video, ContraPoints is presenting very feminine.
Might have been her non-binary point. I can't remember. Can't remember.
Either way,
and then she cuts from that. She cuts from that and just like, you know, if you don't like it, like that's it. Like, comment, subscribe, and then she says, "Contact me if you wanna. If you disagree with me, I'll totally listen. Shoot me a message over Facebook." It's like that's it. You just ended with the you like watching black men bang your wife.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Whatever you're saying. Continue.
Oh no! I wasn't saying anything. There's like the whole idea of I will listen to you.
I just had the one point in this entire thing. I had the one point, which is that one thing she said seems very insensitive. If I'm interpreting it correctly, and that's my one good idea for the stream.
Yeah, it's absolutely a bunch of offensive edgelord garbage. This is like, if Vosh said this, he would get in trouble for saying this. You know what I mean? It's that tier. And for the record, it was not well responded to. I talked to fans about it. I got racial abuse. I got transphobic abuse. smaller scale because it was a smaller fandom. I was really new to Twitter. I did not expect any of this, but yeah, I got a lot of really creepy, weird bullshit when I did try to talk about it. Contra never reached back, so that's just a little bit of bullshit they attach onto the ends of videos. So yeah, that's the transcript. I think it's pretty obvious why it's like super disgusting and not okay.
And
yeah,
like,
so
it didn't end there.
I feel like I feel like a lot of it is hiding behind the just a joke defense.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and
like,
of course, if you look at the way that she behaves, it's so clear that none of this is a joke. If you actually look at this, thinking of it, she is saying this straight. Oh my god, it's obviously terrible, even to really ignorant white people like me. But because she frames it as a joke and as a quote unquote satire, she just gets away with it.
There's also that preemptive, like, she knows she's going to be criticized for this, so she's cutting them off and like declaring them as like oversensitive SJWs. You need to tone back on like the sensitivity. Because like when you do that, it's you're in a box.
What to be concerned with.
Like, you know, you're in a box at that point. It's like you can either react and like criticize her, in which case she's going to use that as evidence that everything she said was right because you know you're responding, or you don't. She gets a free pass, and she gets to say, "See, nobody said anything." So you know.
Yeah, exactly, and you know, it's very much she knows what's best for us. She knows what our priorities should be. I do not think this attitude has gone away. I think that the difference between this video and her later videos is that it's just not acceptable to say that stuff on like LeftTube anymore. I mean, obviously there's a lot of problems, there's a lot of bullshit, but it's like you would have gotten dragged for this if you posted this now. You know that like how much have you actually evolved? I don't know. I don't think it's been addressed.
The demonization of her black critics continues today because she like released that like 5 screenshot like clips of like if you see anyone using these, you should block them instantly. And like 80% of it is black vernacular, you know, and she again later on in her cancelling video, before she goes on to do the whole thing, let's investigate what happened with Buck Angel in relation to Lana Wachowski, etc. She actually goes for like 8 of those points, like she says 8 of the things that she listed, which again, this is all black vernacular, so that's how she was framing her critics before going into this investigation and then derailing it and saying you're all secret Nazis. So, you know,
the dog whistling, you know, all of the stuff with like cancel culture. Like at the beginning of the video, she acknowledges where cancel culture comes from. She acknowledges that this is like a term that comes from Black Twitter and whatever, and then she just doesn't do anything with it. She doesn't stop and go, how can I integrate this into my analysis? If I think critically about this and I really address my privilege like I should, how does that impact the video? I can't see, like, there's no point where she really circles back to that point and acknowledges that, you know, she is really just silencing Black people. Like, she's silencing other marginalized people, obviously. But hey.
Like, the thing is, like, because of the way that she does this, the way that she creates this narrative around her critics and like links it to certain cultural practices, etc., she doesn't have to like lift a finger to like point at anyone. Her fan base will just take over from there, and we all know how fucking toxic they can be. You know, yes, is there anything else you'd like to talk about in relation to your experience with Natalie?
Yeah, just a little bit. Just the bulk of the criticism I ended up getting. Like,
sorry, before you get into that, can I just quickly highlight something in the chat?
Okay.
Toddeth Gingham says, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, says, quote, "Show knows what's best for us," unquote. I actually sent Brennan and Mo a short essay on white leftists by Steve Biko this week. No response. Which, not very surprising.
We know a few
but-
other people that are trying to talk to Brennen, but they don't seem to respond. They don't seem to want to respond. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Which, Brennan did say, hey, look, I'm all here for civil discussion. You just, you got to be civil. You got to, whatever. It's like, no, you're not.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We will get to that.
Todd also says, also no response to when I asked Brennan to address the racial abuse happening on their own thread.
Mhm.
There's also a lot of
Surprise,
ableism that's been
surprise.
going on. I've been noticing on both Brennan and Mo's threads claims of terminally online, need to touch grass, need to go see therapist. All this stuff's been thrown out there, and they're not saying anything.
Oh, yeah, it's messed up.
Yeah.
I also do want to quickly ask you, Todd, is Show Knows What's Best for Us the title of the essay? And maybe it sounds really interesting and really important. Did you want to throw a link to that in the chat? You don't have to, of course, but that's just a suggestion.
Don't know if they can throw links into the chat. That's the thing.
Sorry, the what?
I don't know if they can throw links into the chat.
Oh, okay. We're professionals. We can.
If you send it to us via a Discord or Twitter or whatever, we'll add it if it has relevance. So I will add it to the description. Okay. Yes. Anyway, Seth, please continue.
Yeah, so I really liked, I think Ethel pointed out, like the phrasing that you used was linking this sort of coding, this like racialized language of critics, of linking that to, how critics are perceived. It also links into, the aggressive tone. I feel like there's multiple access. There's also, it hits multiple points, like, the obviously the anti-blackness and like stuff like the sort of yellow horde trope of that was like an anti-Asian racial trope,
Yeah.
And I want to point out that this sort of stuff is always framed as a threat to white women, right? I think that ends up coming up if you look at like a later thread where she's comparing, like literally saying white women, that's not my interpretation, but literally saying white women are like Jesus dying on the cross, and that's like what cancel culture is. And I say literally, like I know it's figurative, but yeah, she outlines white femininity. She seems to like emphasize that, and yeah, I think that ends up linking later into, after the Buckangel stuff, after the pronoun circle stuff, after all that, I was involved in those criticisms. I've talked extensively about that stuff. If we want to touch on that stuff again later, totally. But the second, like where I got the biggest amount of criticism has been over the racial stuff, and this coding really comes back up with the Tabby character, who, I know fans sometimes like to interpret Tabby, whatever the Tumblr girl stereotype character is, as like they identify with her and they like her, but like that character is intended to be a caricature
Natalie
of,
hates them and is like really
yeah.
pissed off that people fucking actually like the character. She seems to be going like, oh, they're so outrageous and all this, and no one's buying it. It's like,
yeah. And so it's just like, cringy SJW trans person online. And also interesting that Tabby's shown to use she, they pronouns when Contra doesn't. Interesting choice there, right? But yeah, the aesthetics that are put on Tabby heavily reference Japanese pop culture. I pointed that out. I said it was racist. That was the first time ContraPoints actually engaged with something I had said directly. And it was like unprecedented. Like I've experienced big people with big platforms saying shit to me. I have, I've been, how many times has like Fosh brought me up? I've had Xander Hall, I've had like all those people. I've never like actually felt the way I did, but I'll get into like the effect it had on me. Like I'll just want to explain my basic criticism of that is that she's wearing like there's two appearances that I usually like I focus on. In one she's wearing cat ears, like a shirt that says uwu, an anime body pillow, and like the background is just plastered with like Pokemon plushies, stuff like that. it's literally just a mishmash of stereotypes that also really emphasize infantilization and fetishization. I think it's really, really fucked up that Tabby is coded that way. And I get that the defense, you know, she ends up saying that I called her out for appropriating weeb culture, quote unquote. And I'm like no, you know, there's another, like, that's not it. Like, I don't care. Like, even if like you view it as that, and you like, she's clearly not anti-cultural appropriation. I don't think you can make that argument. I don't think that's, you know, it's cringe to her. That's what it is. It's cringe if a white person does it. I don't really think that she's gonna judge people of color differently who engage in you know, Japanese pop culture. It's like, you know, she's also the other one. She's wearing a fairly well put together like Lolita outfit outside of the cat ears, which like that's like, it's like literally a street fashion. I know the term is really awkward, but I like, trust me, like it's really difficult to like explain that in like a Western context, and explain that terminology. But it's not like an anime thing. It's literally a street fashion culture. I got a lot of people coming at me really upset, saying that I was saying that I thought by using the term street fashion that I was saying it was how all Asian people dress and stuff like that. And I was like, no. You know, like that's not what I'm saying. It is like street fashion. It's a subculture. It's a niche thing. But like, look, this stuff was really important to me growing up. I'm sitting there like trying to explore gender expression. I'm trying to explore like, you know, my relation to the broader like East and Southeast Asian diaspora, you know, in my preteen and teen years, having access to like compilations of like of street snaps of like Japanese street fashion was like really inspirational to me. I ended up getting into these communities. Like, I'm not some random who doesn't know what I'm talking about. You know, I was pretty like, we had like fashion show brands, and we had like we had a lot of events locally. I organized meetups. I made a lot of friends who were people of color. We had people of color only like meetups for just like for this like fashion culture stuff, subculture stuff. And yeah, it's not, you know, it's not something, it has nothing to do with anime. It has nothing to do with like this like quote unquote cringe weeb shit. It's literally just a street fashion that looks weird, that looks whatever, and she's just mashing all this stuff up, and it's characterized as this is the person you're supposed to hate. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with that. Other people might be comfortable with that. If it, you know, if they, you know, that's fine. You know, you can have your opinion on that. It does not deserve people calling me the N-word and saying like, oh, this is why N-words shouldn't have opinions, and yeah, just you know, suicide baiting and literal Nazis in my notes. I was like kind of caught between this like people who felt like ContraPoints was somehow calling out cultural appropriation by doing this, and then on the other hand, people who thought that I was saying like, no, you can never wear this fashion. I'm like, no, she's using it in a way that I find derogatory, that I find mocking, and I think she has a really bad track record on this stuff. I think it's racist. It pisses me off. I don't like it. I should be allowed to say that, right?
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
Without yeah, you know, and it impact, like, I was blocking so many people because she essentially subtweeted me. She didn't name me by name. That's, you know, hardly credit, but the replies were immediately just full of people screen capping it, uncensored screen cap, so everyone knew where to go. I had her blocked. Very important point. And, you know, I had her blocked. She shouldn't have been doing that. Why was she even seeing that? And it wasn't a cancel culture mob. It was literally just me. It was me, one person tweeting it. Most people who even followed me didn't really get where I was coming from. I know I didn't explain myself the first time around. I revisited the topic and explained it better, right? But yeah, I like, okay, worst case scenario. if a person of color calls you racist, if that person of color, like, we can be wrong sometimes. I don't think I was wrong in that situation, to be clear. But worst case scenario, if I'm genuinely wrong and I'm being too harsh, whatever, that's still not how you respond. I was blocking so many people that I actually got like API limited by Twitter, so manually blocking them. I couldn't block them fast enough. Like, it was atrocious. I had, the Japan understanders. I had people, like, for some reason randomly going off about like child porn and pedophilia and like weird shit. It was really, really extreme, and I did feel suicidal. I felt suicidal. I have never felt like that over an online interaction. I haven't felt like that since I was a teenager. It's fucking unacceptable. And even in conversations where people think I'm reasonable and they're like ContraPoint stands, they will bring up my argument as an example of the, oh, well, you're reasonable, but, people are calling her racist for dressing like this and in doing this character. And I'm like, that was me. That was literally only me. There was no mob. It was just me. And like the people I'm talking to don't know that it's me, obviously. Yeah. So yeah, absolute garbage. It's really difficult being, it's hard being a trans person online. It's really difficult being a trans person of color online. I had autistic in my bio. That was used to make a lot of really messed up comments as well. Yeah, I had to change my @. I'm not going to say what my @ used to be because, harassment issues. But yeah, so that when we talk about Brennen, we talk about ContraPoint's having a harassment gang and levying this to silence people of color. Talking about racism, talking about the way she uses stuff in her content. That's what we're talking about when we say that ContraPoints has traumatized people. So there you go.
Like, the whole reason I wanted to start with like making clear our issues with Natalie is because there has been for like years now, because the issues have been going on. Yeah, it all like Tinderbox moment with the cancelling video, and everything just like got 10 times worse. But like, people have been calling out on the racism and the MB-phobia for years and years now. Mm-hmm. And she has such an audience and such an aggressive audience that they have spent those years telling us it's all in your head. You imagined it. You heard it from someone else. What did she ever actually do? I saw recently there's actually a trans Twitter group which like does wonderful work on the ground, but like they were posting, oh, what did ContraPoints actually ever do? Like I hear people complaining about her. It's like I looked and I saw like 5 to 6 trans people in good faith explaining the harm that Natalie had done to them personally. This group ignored that. One of her defenders came along and said, oh, they're just making it up, like there's actually no reason, it's all this. And the group went, yeah, that seems to be the case. It's like, I can see the 5 to 6 other people you are completely ignoring,
Is this the same group who like had a go at me for being slightly hyperbolic when I was criticizing someone because I was using hyperbole as a critical device? Possibly. Or is this a different word?
Begins with what, their name?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, that's the one.
That's the one who was so desperate to defend Natalie Wynn that they like threw a massive tantrum, tried to police my account for being slightly hyperbolic as a rhetorical device. This is
gaslighting on like a mass scale. Hundreds, if not thousands of people have been attacked and abused by Natalie's fans. A lot of them, I saw a lot of people I knew, friends, etc., close their accounts. I've seen a lot of people lock them down, change their names. There's been some really horrific shit going on. And it's like, and that's only the people who've been impacted directly. There's also the indirect impact, which we'll get into later with the whole like cancelling narrative and the way that she's dragged this reactionary rhetoric to the left and how it's being used against anyone being progressive. It's being used against like survivors of sexual assault. You know, like she has that video has been watched like 3 million times. It is still up. Some people like to come at me and say she's apologized for the whole Buck Angel situation. Apparently she's done it in like Patreon or whatever. And it's like, well, first of all, that's not an apology. If you put your apology behind a paywall, that's not an apology. That's a marketing opportunity. Secondly, the video cancelling itself, which again, she presents her critics as using terms associated with the black community. She then does this whole spiel about, oh, if you criticize domestic abuse, like public acts of domestic abuse, you're a secret Nazi. You know, that set the standard for discourse on the topic of Natalie Wynn. And that has just been used as the justification of violence against so many people, you know. And this needs to be pointed out because, like, there's no way me and Levi will come out of this stream looking better than we were before. Brennen, he is someone who went through some really horrific shit. And this year, they thankfully started getting, like, the recognition of what they went through recently. The problem is, like, so many people are just going to take that. They went through something horrific, therefore they can't hurt other people. They're just going to write Levi and myself off. And you know what? We can live with that. We expect that now. Like, we talked before the show about the whole idea of the status quo likes to use the anger of the people hurt as a way of, like, delegitimizing the hurt that they feel. We know, like, this is probably not gonna fucking convince any of Natalie's hardcore fans. That's not the point of discussing all this. The point of discussing all this are for 10, 20, 100 of Natalie's victims who have been gaslit the past fucking year, 2 years, whatever, to let them know that their pain, they didn't imagine it. It's not just in their head. They're not crazy, okay? And they're not unreasonable to be angry at someone who fucking came barging in unprovoked and attacks them for that pain. Which I guess sort of leads on to Brennen and the whole situation, you know, regarding M. It's yeah.
One thing I should have jumped in with before, but it's just taking a while for my brain to get into gear because I've had a rough several days, is Contra's cancel culture model. Speaking of how it's being used to defend sexual assault. Right now, it is being used to discredit me because I criticize someone's coverage of Lily Orchard, who, if you are if you watch our videos, you will know Lily Orchard is someone who grooms children. And our coverage of her is being discredited, and I am being discredited as someone who's made other resources for Lily's victims with that cancel culture model. So that cancel culture model is being used in an indirect way to help pedophiles.
You know,
I've seen like you know, politicians use it. I had a prof bring it up in class, and all the students were we all got our back up. Like, why are you? It's a classics course. Why are you talking about cancel culture, right? It's it's been popularized, and it's been sort of given a liberal quote of fame.
Because before it was just a reactionary talking point. They are the only people who were using it regularly. Natalie dragged it into the liberal sphere. I'm not going to say the left sphere. She dragged it into the liberal sphere and normalized it there.
And she also gave them this very intellectual sounding way of putting it, to the point where we're not even allowed to use nouns anymore.
Yeah.
If you call someone a racist or a transphobe or something, that means that you're essentializing that. No, this is the essentializing phase. Yeah, it means that you're saying that they are, no matter what they do, they're always going to be this thing. It's like, that's not how it works at all. That's one of the things that really annoys me. If I say you're transphobic, I'm not saying that no matter what you do, you're always going to be a horrible transphobic person who does nothing but just leave a trail of trans bodies in your wake. What I'm saying is that right now, something in your brain is transphobic and it's making you do transphobic things. And until you learn better, you're going to keep doing transphobic things. But you can learn and you can do better and you can change your behavior, and then you are no longer transphobic. That's how things work. But because of this fucking model, we're not allowed to use nouns anymore. We have to talk about how, no, this isn't a transphobe. This is someone who did transphobic things, completely divorcing their actions from the brain that came up with those ideas and enacted them, and acting like it has nothing to do with them. It's just, oh, transphobia just kind of happens by some mechanism out in the ether when this person is around.
It's got the exact same intention as the being called racist. That's a slur, or being called a TERF. That's a slur. You know, it's like you can't label the oppressors. If I can stop you labeling the oppressors, that makes it far more difficult for you to call for accountability.
And what's ridiculous is they'll go another step, and instead of having to say this person did racist things, this person did transphobic things, what you're actually meant to say to not be cancelling is you have to say they allegedly did these things, and then it becomes a conversation about did they actually do these things, and it's right back to gaslighting.
Yeah,
that's right back to saying it's all in your head.
I think it becomes really, it's like, who is actually getting policed? Is it like when we say we don't mean like everyone, right? It's for example, why am I the perpetrator of cancel culture by criticizing ContraPoints? Did she cancel me? Like, I was the one with the mob. Does she have to watch her language when she calls me stuff? Right? It just simply doesn't work both ways. And if we were to really apply that and take that in good faith and apply this to the most marginalized people, then we wouldn't have the situation we have right now. It's not being applied that way. Also, another note about the cancel culture video is that I haven't seen anything criticizing the fact that James Charles has had something like 5 more victims come forward. Sorry, go ahead.
Actually, it came up in my original 3 responses. I went over James Charles. The one case that she brings up, first of all, the person that she said never called them predator actually did make clear accusations of predatory. We found the video of her saying it, so she did actually say what Natalie said she never said. So it wasn't the internet running away with it. She actually did say it. Here's the thing, I found more cases before that that weren't related to her case. So there were multiple other cases, which I explained in my video. I think she retracted her accusation because it was a smart marketing decision. I don't think she retracted it because it wasn't true.
You know, and I think at this point that has become very well known. I think that's become a very I think most people now acknowledge that about James Charles, but this sort of cancel culture narrative absolutely helped cover all of that up. Yeah. It covered it up. If you brought that up, well, look, you're just trying to do cancel culture. Didn't you, don't you know better? Don't you know, didn't you see his debunking video or whatever? I saw even still people will link the cancel culture video. So it's not okay, that was in the past. It's not relevant anymore. It's still being suggested. It's still being linked.
The fans are on so much auto-ride. I've been going around to feminist groups. I managed to get most of the Indian feminist groups to stop sharing Natalie's video because of the racism, the attacks on the Me Too movement and all this. But I've been sharing why you shouldn't be sharing Natalie's stuff because of all this horrific shit. And I share my videos responding to the cancelling video, and people respond by linking the cancelling video, telling me that this resolves everything. It's that's just how fanatical her fans are. They won't even listen to the slightest criticism. It is just, she's the queen. She is
They still
invaluable.
defend Buck Angel's Buck Angel's pyramid scheme. It's that's the most obvious. It's the most easy thing to know that is blatantly wrong. Oh well, it was probably a mistake. He didn't know better. Come on.
That's the one thing I thought that no one would be defending is the pyramid scheme. I was expecting people just didn't know about it, but apparently we just can't live in a world where people can do basic stuff. Todd has a wonderful point. I really need to read more of the chat more often, but Todd has a wonderful point I have to point out. You can't call someone a transphobe, but you can call someone a sport.
Yeah.
It's all double standards. Everything. Every fucking thing these people do. They will tell you, you cannot do this, 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 and this. And all of those things are their bread and butter.
Yeah. It's completely designed to protect privilege. That's how it's, you can see that's how it's employed. They will often say, oh, well, this affects marginalized people the most. But, you know, well, you know, like when Contra did that extremely bizarre thread about the crucifixion, she specified white women. And it was specifically in defense of racism, but, you know, obviously there was other stuff going on. And she specified it was like white women dying on the cross being sacrificed. It's not like, you know, how can you say that, like, how can you throw these token acknowledgements in, which I think are really just to cover her ass, by saying like, oh, well, marginalized people are affected by this. It's like bullying, you know, transphobia, racism. Like, so you're treated as disposable. So therefore, my model covers you too. But then it doesn't actually work like that in practice. It's never actually employed that way. And yeah, it just silences us.
It's like taxes, tax benefits, tax cuts, you know. Oh, it's going to benefit everyone. No, it's not. It's just benefiting those at the very top.
Yeah.
But she's convinced everyone is in their interest.
Sorry.
It's like, gone.
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to remember. I had an extra point in there, but I forgot for a sec. But yeah, the fact that she throws in this stuff and appeals to like people who've gone through stuff like what Brennen has, what many of us have. Cancel culture is designed to appeal to that. It's designed to say, look at your trauma, look at what you've been through, and feel sympathetic with me.
It's like I went through like a Darvo smear campaign by a much larger channel in 2019. I actually brought this up in my original response to Natalie. And it's like, here's the thing, I can just say someone lied about me and show evidence of them lying. I don't need to design an entire model and demonize certain, you know, dialects, etc., and attach it and like pretend like all my critics are acting in like bad faith. They're super secret Nazis from Kiwi farms, etc. It's possible to like respond to like an abusive mob without resorting to all of that. Because like her actions don't seem to be empowering any sort of marginalized person hurt by a mob. It just seems to be enabling people like her with power who are earning hundreds of $1,000s a month, you know, just to escape completely, you know, scot-free. It's just, you know.
Todd's bringing up in chat. I am now actually reading chat. Todd is bringing up in chat that the like trans people hurt each other because of trauma. And I think that's a really good point to zero in on, because it's like, why is you're traumatized, you're speaking from trauma, why is that like the end of the discussion, right? So if I am speaking from trauma, if I'm completely wrong, then why are you reacting this way? Like, if you know, it like you could have, you know, instead of subtweeting me, what if you like retweeted like my top surgery fund or something like that? Like, I could maybe have hundreds of people donating to like improve my life and improve the conditions that you think are causing me to lash out at you. But no, you're actually going to
Also, what's very interesting, she's doing a bit of a Xanderhal here, where you, because you are trans, you are automatically traumatized, and therefore everything you say is invalid. But her, we have to listen to her. She might have some good points. She's not traumatized. She's not wrong. Very interesting to understand, and one a lot of people like to use.
Anyway, I do think we should actually move on to Brennen, because we talked about Natalie, and like again, it's important to do. It's important to remind like people that you weren't crazy if you went for this horrific shit. I know there's a lot of people in the Essence of Community sphere who went through similar things to, you know, Seth, myself, etc. You know, so you're not alone. You didn't imagine it. It's not a fiction of your imagination, because recently Brennen tweeted out the following quote: "I think it's sad that Natalie feels alienated from her own community. It sucks that we fight amongst ourselves so much that we ostracize trans people that are doing everything in their power to be good advocates. It's important to hold our own accountable for shitty things they've said and done, especially if they refuse to apologize or change. But we're not holding Natalie accountable. We're blindly hating on her out of spite, misinformation, and poor media literacy. I stand with Natalie Wynn. I see her. I empathize with her. And I want her to feel safe, loved, and accepted by her community. To which Natalie responded with 3 purple heart emojis. Of course, the response to this was pretty immediate. There was a lot of people responding to it. One thing I do want to tackle, because I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, I think I did actually, but again, Natalie apparently may have apologized on Patreon streams. Again, that's not an actual apology. That is a marketing ploy designed to get people to pay her money to get what she should be giving them for free. Secondly, the videos, including cancelling, are still up. You can't apologize for what you're currently doing. This will be kind of relevant because it was a big sticking point for the Calvin conversation. Calvin's, videos abusing non-binary trans people were still up at the time where Calvin was trying to claim that, he's come over now, he's no longer doing this, he's doing better. And people like Xander Holt and Riley were trying to, PR his image. But you had your response, which, do you want me to read out your response and then you can comment on it, or do you want to be the one to read out your response?
Yeah, you can totally read it out.
Okay. So, Seth stated that, quote, "I'm not really into being called illiterate because I don't agree with your assessment of a YouTuber, especially when a lot of these issues are around topics like AAVE, African American Vernacular English, and racism. It's just a very shady angle to adopt. It doesn't require illiteracy or ignorance to come to a different conclusion on an issue. Often it's just a different set of experiences and values. I had to change my @ because she sent her followers on me when I called something she did racial stereotyping, leading to dogpiling that included having the N-word aimed at me in my notes, and an extreme amount of open ableism and transphobia. I don't have her platform though. I don't get to voice how shitty that was. Neither does anyone else who has been through something similar with her fans. It's not poor media literacy. She's just a bully with a fan base full of bullies." End quote. Couple of mistakes there. I don't know if you want to add on that or anything.
It's funny hearing it read back because I see that and I go, wow, that's I did a good job with that
Yes.
response.
Yes, you
Oh,
did.
you did.
As
It's
compared
so
to my initial response, you were very collected in what you said, which you shouldn't have to. But again, I realize that we are being judged to 2 very different standards.
It's always good to go back and read these things, even if
Mhm.
it's you know generally what your points were, but it's so easy rereading the transcript of that stream. It's I had actually downplayed that in my head, and then I had maybe also overplayed how aggressive I was in the hindsight, and then you go back and read it and it's I'm so polite.
Yeah. And that's the thing.
It's
It's almost like you've been dealing for years with hundreds of thousands of people telling you imagined the issue and that you're the aggressive one.
This is honestly
the gaslighting.
This is why it took
Yeah.
me 6 months to do my videos on Rachel Oates, and this is why it takes me very, very long time to do videos on these sorts of things.
Mhm.
It's because I'll spend months just sitting with it, just to make sure that I'm not downplaying anything in my head, just kind of letting myself process it, because it's really, really, really hard to speak accurately on these issues when you have so many people telling you that you're wrong, that it's not a big deal, that it never happened, that you don't have a right for whatever reason, that actually this other person is the victim. It's so hard
Mhm.
to just get everything straight in your head when you're dealing with all of that.
Yeah.
But it is a really nice feeling, I think, to go back and think, wow, I really did a good job of explaining that.
Now,
There's
later,
that one silver lining on this horrible shit that should never happen to anyone.
Yeah. Later on, you would add to that thread. I'm not going to read it out, just noting the facts that you got insta-blocked. You did actually manage to respond in one other place, and that's when Brennen decided to subtweet me. We'll get to my response later and like discuss how Brennen decided to respond and who to. Brennen decided to subtweet me, responding with quote, "Hey, I don't really mind if you have a problem with me. I don't even mind having productive conversations with people who disagree with me. But don't use my trauma as an argument against me or a way to guilt trip me into empathizing with your side. It's offensive and just weird." End quote. Yes, so Brennan, they quite clearly understand where I was coming from with the whole empathizing thing, trying to like point out that the similarity of what we've been through. But again, you responded with quote, "I understand why that rubs you the wrong way, but you do get the point though, right? The person who made that point is someone whose trauma you very directly trod on by dropping your values in order to defend someone who put them through similar shit that you went through. Is it appropriate? Not really. Yeah, not really. I think it's important to note that the person you're subtweeting isn't just a random with an unrelated disagreement. That's a pretty disingenuous framing." End quote. One thing to note there, you publicly disagreed with me when I was being quite upfront with my feelings in another thread. And again, this is all... you also then did link your other thread.
That I linked after I was blocked because I was mad.
But those are your two interactions with Brennan at this point. Those are your two interactions.
Yeah.
You outright disagreed with me, and we can discuss on about like the appropriate nature in a second if you want to. If not, I can talk about it on Twitter at some point. But like, you disagreed with me when Brennan was still keeping me unblocked. I'm still not blocked by Brennan, by the way, just so you know. And yet you were blocked. And like, this is someone who's saying, I am open to like having a civil conversation about these issues, and you were blocked. No explanation as to why. And I get that people
why
don't
is
owe
what
you...
is civil sorry, continue.
I get that people don't owe explanations for why they blocked, but the thing is, you're not the only person of color Brennan blocked for some very mundane stuff. I've actually got a statement here for someone else that we've invited on the show. Sadly, they couldn't make it. I'll read that out after we've done discussing like your case, etc. Actually, I should hand over to you. Actually, like this happened to you, so why am I talking? Sorry, do take the mic.
Okay. Yeah, I guess like my only issue with like why I understand why Brennan might have a negative reaction to that, right? Like, I understand if someone is making a comparison to your own trauma in a conflict. I can't really say, no, you have to be 100% okay with that. I
appreciate that they could come back with an angry response. I do appreciate that. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and that was really all that that I felt about that. I don't think that's an excuse to sideline what you said. I don't think it was an excuse to, like, oh, look at how irrational my critics are. Look at how abusive my critics are, and whatever. When it's like what you said wasn't actually that bad. Like, I just like, yeah.
Sorry about the just a minute ago. I just caught myself on my nail. It wasn't like you said. That's the one problem about long nails. Sometimes you catch yourself on your own long nail. Sorry, but yeah, and it's just like I saw you post that you got instantly blocked, and here I was still like arguing, like not giving up, because I'm not someone who's very easy to give up. I'm indomitable in many ways. Once I kind of stuck my ground, if I know I've got a good case, I will fucking defend that case to the end. I'm still arguing. And I noticed that you posted that, and I noticed another black friend of mine posted about they just been blocked immediately as well. And it's like, there's something going on here in the difference that they're responding to white people versus people of color. I don't think it's any coincidence the fact that also you mentioned the African American vernacular English point in your comment. So I actually posted in response to you, like, showing I'm still unblocked. Take this what you will.
Yeah.
And
I
it's,
actually predicted it. I said as soon as I saw myself blocked, I was like, bet this is gonna be one of those things, right? Like I bet this is gonna be a thing where nobody else is blocked.
and like what I noticed is a short while after this, um, they decided to do something else that kind of confirmed like what we've been talking about so far with the way critics are presented and being linked to like different ethnic groups. Brennen decided to tweet out that, you know what, I disagree with this video when it first came out. I now like accept it wholeheartedly, and it was Lindsay Ellis's video responding to the charges of racism against her, like declaring that her critics were fucking, you know, the yellow mob. And it's just really
Not just the yellow one, but also the black one, and
yeah.
because she's been accused.
She's been
there's
criticised by the black community. She's also been criticised by the Native American community.
Americans, yeah, three different groups of people for three different instances of racism.
All
People
agree.
like to pretend it's just the Raya thing.
And I want
and
to
it's
just
not.
sorry, go ahead.
No, Seth.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I when this video was going on, I looked up just to talk about, like, it's not just really racial subtext. Like, I wanted to like, how is the fan base receiving this? And I looked on her Reddit, and there were people talking about how we wanted her. Like, I was one of the people who, I didn't really care about the initial tweet. I really didn't like the apology and the follow up. So yeah, and I there were people who were saying that we wanted her to commit honorable seppuku, and people saying that that we were like Wu Maos, which are like paid Chinese government agents, because and this was like stuff that was not removed on the Reddit, that was being upvoted, that people were repeating all throughout like every thread. And you know, because like, oh, she took on Disney, and you know, somehow that means that China wants to silence her, and that literally like the Asian people who called her out, which yes, there were in fact Asian people calling her out. A lot of those people had to block because they had to delete their posts or go private. So maybe you don't see that if you go and research it, but like if you go and like search it. But yeah.
That also reinforces two racial stereotypes as well about Chinese people. The whole idea that like Chinese people are only criticizing for money. So like, you know, there's the whole, they're willing to do anything for money pretty much that's being put forward there. And then there's also like the whole hive mind mentality, you know, that is very often equated to like Asian communities. Oh, they all think alike, they all go together, you know, shoal of fish sort of thing. It kind of reinforces both of those in many ways. Sorry, but yeah, do continue.
Oh yeah, sorry. This last point I wanted to say was that video came out like within a week of those mass shootings in the States that were like vast majority Asian women who were killed in a targeted attack. So just so you know, that's what was going on.
So yes, is there anything else you'd like to note on that, or shall we move on? I can read out Phoenix Lee's statement, and then we can we've got my response to Brennan, so I can show you, like, again, I don't think it was hyper aggressive, I don't think it was disproportionate to what had happened to me, but we can go and show that, like, compared to your response, relative to it, my response was a lot more aggressive and forward about things.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add, or we can always return to things if you remember anything. We will be talking about Mo. We'll just be going through Brennan first, and then we'll go on to Mo, and then we can like talk about the whole thing in general.
Well, I guess should I save this maybe for later? But I want to talk a little bit about sort of the social segregation and this like default segregation and how that relates to just like the habit of blocking, insta blocking people. So
it's probably best now actually with Brennan, because I don't think they blocked you. And I believe they're in the audience as well. At least they were in the audience. I don't know if they're still there. So yes, go ahead if you want to talk about that now.
Yeah, so like I realized that if you don't experience this, if you haven't seen this firsthand, you don't really get it. Like, oh, someone blocked you, why you could be like salty about that or something. But it's like, this is a pattern. It's like, we've been through it to the point where I knew as soon as I got blocked, I knew that wasn't everyone who was being blocked. I knew it. Um, and this is something that has happened in like the sort of bread tube circle. There are really particular controversies with creators we haven't talked about that have a really goody two shoes image that I won't get into. But this happens. It's very common. If you are Black, you have noticed this. Like, I'm sorry, like, I know that's a very broad statement, but like, it's everywhere. The slightest conflict, insta block, like lightning. And there's this issue where there is a sort of soft a sort of soft network sharing power, like network that shares power, that shares resources through like boosting each other, interacting with each other, like featuring on each other's streams. And people think that's not a big deal. People think that like if ContraPoints puts Buck Angel on, and that's not a big deal because he just read a few lines. That is a big deal.
It's not. It's also like the fact that it wasn't just the few lines. It was also like it's an honor, iconic fashion moment. Whole thing on the on her Twitter feed and all of that. But yes,
she went out of her way to highlight it, and she did admit that she like did it intentionally because she knew that trans Twitter didn't like him. Like, yeah, like she did admit that. So, and people
this isn't like I made a video and then I found out a year later this person's bad and I can't go back and edit the video. It's like I decided to invite a piece of shit on and it was great.
When Opulence went out, my only response was pointing out the connection between Buck Angel and Graham Linehan. I didn't say anything about Natalie. I said, hey, like maybe keep this in mind. Like that's what the first response was to Opulence. Hey, you do realize this person has done some horrific shit. Pyramid scheme, domestic abuse, MBphobia, all this stuff. That was the initial response.
Like, and we'll have these people who get elevated, and like it is like the YouTube algorithm is a thing. Everyone wants to complain about why is BreadTube, why is LeftTube so white. That's the reason. It's this level of social segregation where, like, in reality, most white people do not have that many friends who are Black. Other people of color as well. Our neighborhoods are a lot more integrated. Like I live in a super mixed neighborhood. Like versus white neighborhoods. The social ties are extremely important. They're economically important. That's how people get jobs. Like you don't usually get a job through handing a resume in. You get a job through connections. YouTube isn't different. The efforts to just sort of obfuscate, like BreadTube isn't even a thing. Don't attack us because I'm friends. It's like you collab together.
Yeah.
You reference each other. You build this. It's like this like little clique kind of crap, and then you'll just instantly block, like let alone not even just not working with people of color, but you'll just instantly block us. So that just sort of amplifies this. If you don't see Black people being recommended, but you in your algorithm, but you see white people talking about Black issues, that's why. I think that's
And here's the thing: the support also, if you're like a token and you are one of the few ones that they will actually like invite on, etc., that support is very conditional. I always bring it back to what happened in 2019. It's just there's a lot of stuff to be mined from that experience. So pretty much, transphobic person, I think it was the start of April, uploaded a very transphobic video. It's actually, but anyway, they uploaded a very transphobic video. I called it out, criticized it. Thing is, I got brought around to the idea of, like, give them time to fix it. And because I accepted that and I gave them the time to fix it, like, they had a lot of connections. Suddenly those connections were reaching out to me and I was doing streams with them. And, like, my subscriber count was starting to, like, shoot up in ways that I'd never seen before, because I've been pretty insulated in the secular community. I generally kept to myself. The moment that person showed their hand and that they had no intention of actually correcting their transphobia, all of that was yanked away in a second. And yeah, the exact opposite happened. So like the interaction, the collaborations, that is the fastest way to grow your channel. All this. So it's not minor. It's not. There's a reason they go out of their way to like promote everything, like glorify it, and like iconic fashion moment. It's because it actually matters to them. It gets them a lot of stuff.
Well, I mean, look at the that podcast that was announced for Trans Day of Visibility. Don't know if you saw that or not, but a lot of people, a lot of Black trans people criticized that. A lot of trans people of color
Yes, I remember
criticized
that.
that. There were like maybe like 6 people announced. All of them were white. All of them were white, and you know, obviously
And
Natalie was on that.
here's the thing. Whenever you point out that this is an issue, you know a white person is going to come along, or you know, they're going to say, well, why aren't you doing better work? They're going to make it about, you know, it's like, but you're ignoring the systemic conditions here that actually result in this. You know, they always try to shift it. It's like this idea of like personal responsibility, the myth of meritocracy, you know, this idea that if you work hard, you'll be rewarded for it. Right. That's why like the person who doesn't even read the annotation of a graph they fucking show on screen and just like flat out misrepresents the statistics they're quoting, that's why they have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. But someone who will break down a fucking entire fucking journal, go through the statistics, calculate extra statistics from the original statistics they have, like that they will just be ignored or blasted, you know.
Yeah, and you know, none of these problems get fixed. Like I think that Trans Day of Visibility stream ended up getting a lot of backlash, and so they changed and they invited some people on. But it like that wouldn't have happened if there wasn't a backlash. And it's like whenever we push back, you might listen to us and adopt like some of that criticism, but you're still gonna block us, and then you're gonna go find like a token who's going to say what you want to say and invite that person on instead. Like you're never going to invite the person who called you out, the person who pushed back on you. You know, like that's very rare. When do you see that outside of like debate channels? And that's different. That's another that's another thing entirely.
I
Yeah.
should read out the statement I got from Phoenix Lee. Links to their link tree are in the channel description, so you can get the video description, stream description, so you can get them there. They responded to Brennen with, quote, "I don't blindly hate Contra. I have a massive problem with her praising True Scum like Buck Angel and making fun of AAVE and flexing on teenagers on this very app. This woman is practically my age, aka old enough to know better." End quote. That is about as milquetoast as one could write. That is the one singular thing Phoenix Lee wrote to them. And they got blocked for it. Instantly
And
blocked.
we're not talking about people with thousands of, I mean,
No,
I do.
Phoenix
I have
Lee
like 4,000
is,
now.
like, she's relatively small.
Yeah, we're not
I'm
talking
just-
about people with contra levels. Like, you know, you see someone calling you out who has like 300
She
times
has
your follower
590
count, and that's one
followers.
thing. Yeah, it's totally not that situation. I have a similar following count to Brennen. Like, it's not, nobody's, you're not gonna have like the mob sicked on you.
But
For
anyway,
that.
Phoenix gave the statement for the show. They were invited on. I should say Phoenix, they, she pronouns. They were invited on. Sadly, they couldn't make it. But they gave us a statement. I've been hearing this same kind of rhetoric from ContraPoint's most ardent defenders, that all of us who are upset with her are that all of us who are upset with her just blindly hate her. That we've never actually been angry about things she's said or done. That it's one long game of telephone, every excuse in the book. My only intention was to clarify that I did not hate Natalie, but rather that I was unhappy with the choices she made and the fact that she'd rather play the victim than own up to them. I don't understand why we're supposed to feel guilty about criticizing Natalie because she feels some young people on Twitter are harassing her. Firstly, she has thousands of devoted supporters who can easily drown her critics out, so it seems pretty easy to just ignore them. Secondly, she's not special because people are mean to her online. Since I started making YouTube content, I've had tons of people mocking my weight and appearance, misgendering me, and even outright lying about what I believe and say. I don't have the luxury to just put my life on hold to have a pity party whenever I'm not being coddled, nor do I have thousands of fans who will indulge me if I do. With all that in mind, I've repeatedly gone out of my way to keep my critiques of ContraPoints as civil as I can, and I'm disappointed that even that isn't enough for Brennen." End quote. So again, like, there is no way that, like, to critique Brennen. Like, Brennen made a big show about, again, like, in response to subtweeting me, a big show about civil discussion. But when you actually respond civil, that's how Brennen reacts. That's how he reacts. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add on to that, the statement.
Yeah, just the emphasis on like you say you want civil discussion. Like, what does that mean? If that's not civil discussion, if what I said wasn't civil discussion, what is that then?
Yeah.
You can kind of fill in the blanks.
I very much love to throw out these terms like civil discussion, and there's no details about what they are at all, so that they can just say, okay, that thing I don't like, that's not civil discussion. That's not civil discussion. No matter what you do, they can just say, yeah, no, that's not civil discussion I wanted. So we're not going to talk about it.
It's like the whole notion of respect and how that changes. You know, oh, like, you have to respect me as an authority, but I don't even have to respect you as a person, you know? That kind of shift. And as for civil, like, we'll delve further into this later, but gaslighting, telling victims of abuse that they didn't actually suffer what they suffered. They're just making it up. It's all in their head. They're just media illiterate, which, by the way, incredibly elitist thing to say. Also,
elitist, racist, ableists.
Yeah. Like, when you do that, that's not civil. That's violent. You know?
And also telling people that this person who hurt you, they're actually the victim and they need our sympathy.
But anyway, I believe your quote is next, Levi.
So when I saw Brennan's thread, I immediately quote tweeted, I think it was the second one in the thread, I had some criticisms.
That was the second one. "It is important to hold our own accountable for shitty things they've said and done, especially if they refuse to apologize or change. But we're not holding Natalie accountable. We're blindly hating on her out of spite, misinformation, and poor media literacy." So.
So I really had I took issue with this idea that it was just like misinformation. Like we've spent the past hour and a half breaking down. This is not just a mistake. This is not people just not understanding, just hearing things second, third, fourth hand. The people who have problems with Natalie have been hurt horribly, like Seth has, or know people who have see things that are harmful, etc. And so I said to Brennen, find me one trans box who takes issue of Natalie Wynn, who can't tell you about at least one incident where she did something inexcusable, was called out for it, and covered it up with gaslighting harassment. Find me one. And I also really wanted to talk about the idea of poor media literacy. It's something that's popped up a lot. If I recall correctly, I'm pretty sure it popped up in my recently I have directly been abused by someone online. I'm pretty sure that poor media literacy came up there as well. And it's something that people say when they want to just dismiss people's grievances with the idea that they are just too stupid to understand how media works. It's basically the idea of you don't understand satire with a coat of paint. And I wrote that, I pointed that out, and I said that this is ridiculous because you don't need to understand media to see that these things are wrong and harmful. Publicly mocking, degrading a trans woman, disparaging Black vernacular, defending domestic abusers, disparaging things that are primarily in place to help non-binary people, etc., etc., etc. All of these things are very obviously harmful, no matter how many layers of satire you try and put on that. And like these are things she did. It's not like I misunderstood the satire. Like these are things that she physically did. And the people who do come at me with satire, I didn't say this in the thread, but if you do want to come at me with the satire argument, or why can't we make art anymore? Like, here's the thing: if you make satire that people cannot see as satire, if they're not media literate, if they don't have special training, or they don't have massive galaxy brains, then guess what? Your satire is bad. A really good example of satire is there was this article saying that any man who goes out after a certain time should be accompanied by a responsible woman. And that was satirizing the idea that if women don't want to get hurt at night, then they should have a male friend with them. That is good satire, because if you take it literally, it doesn't hurt people. If you misunderstand that, then you didn't actually, people aren't seeing a racism or transphobia or defending domestic abusers or anything like that. And also because it puts the power in the hands of the marginalized group, and it's mocking the abusers in that situation. It's mocking the oppressors. That's brilliant satire. But putting on a fucking sugar skull, that's not good satire. Why is that good satire? So, if you do want to insist against all the evidence that ContraPoints is just satirizing things and that this is just art, well, okay, it's bad art and it's harmful art, and we're allowed to be angry at it. And I didn't talk about this in the thread either, but later on I broke down the idea of productive conversations, saying that I'm blanking now. I can't remember what I said.
Well,
we can come back to it later because it does.
I remember what I think I saw you tweet something about productive. Is it like, are you trying to get like, when you say something isn't a productive conversation, are you saying that it isn't producing the results you want? Because I thought that was really good.
I think someone replied that to me actually.
Well, you can research it whilst I'll go over my response to Brennen. I'll do that quickly, and then you can move on to Mo's response to the response. And then with Mo, again, I'm open to having civil conversation comes up again, so we can link it there. So if you want to quickly hunt for your post. So as for my response, again, keep in mind what Seth said, what he said compared to what I said, because whilst I don't think I went for, too far or anything, there is quite clearly a difference in tone. My original response to Brennan's thread was, quote, that wasn't part of the quote, was, quote, want to talk about alienation? Natalie alienated victims of domestic abuse like myself because she decided to label the people criticizing her for promoting and worshipping a known domestic abuse secret Nazis. An act which has never been accounted for, end quote. However, what really seemed to kick the hive was the post that I made to my own wall, in which I did tag Brennen in, which was, quote, I have to say, Brennen Beckwith, your gaslighting disgusts me. You spent years suffering at your abuser, only to turn around and tell ContraPoints victims that the only reason they're angry at her is because they're apparently too stupid or too media illiterate to understand. You're describing yourself here, and this is reference to an image, only with Natalie in place of Calvin. Her video labeling MB folk, abuse victims, and victims of Buck's trans-surgery pyramid scheme, secret Nazis, is still up. It's still dominating the conversation, making some people terrified to speak. The whole you're describing yourself here was in relation to a screenshot I shared, which is one of Brennan's tweets, which states, quote, I don't think I'll ever be able to explain how Calvin Gower hurts me, how he and his supporters continue to rub salt in, end quote. As an interesting tidbit, I noticed this as I was going back and looking at it. The reason I found that so quickly is because I'd seen it, I'd liked it, because I understood exactly what Brennen is saying there. Like, trying to get people to even acknowledge in good faith the harm Natalie has done countless people. It's like existential horror. It's like being stuck in a fucking glass cube with like 1 meter thick glass in the middle of a street. You can see countless people walking around you, and you're just screaming, and nobody can hear you. You know, and that's all you can do. All you can do is continue to scream, to vent your pain, your frustration, your hurt, your anger, and nobody even acknowledges it. And the fact is, I've got a few points to unpack here, and the first one is, as mentioned earlier, gaslighting is not offensive. Oh shit, before I get onto that, there is a subtweet, which I need to remind you again. Brennen saw my post and responded, "Hey, I don't really mind if you have a problem with me. I don't even mind having productive conversations with people who disagree with me, but don't use my trauma as an argument against me or a way to guilt trip me into empathizing with your side. It's offensive and just weird." End quote. To which I responded with, quote, "Here's my advice. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't be everything you preach against. Problem solved." End quote.
Okay, so I found the productive conversation.
I'll do the unpacked first stuff, and then we'll go to Mo,
Okay.
and then we'll bring it up, okay?
By the time we're done with Mo, I'm not going to care anymore about what I said on Twitter about productive conversations.
Oh, you sure? Okay.
I am sure, yeah.
Okay, then if you want to do the productive conversations, I'll do the unpacking then.
Yeah, just quickly, just so people aren't like curious about what I said, if nothing else, is I basically just pointed out that every time someone calls for productive conversations, they start the conversation by denying all, and this links back to the existential horror thing. They start the conversation by denying all of the issues they claim to want to discuss. So literally, let's have a productive conversation by saying there is nothing to talk about except for how you're wrong and it's all in your head.
It's like turning up to a debate group that wants to debate the real issues, but they refuse to acknowledge, you know, the humanity of certain groups. Or like, yeah.
It's like turning up to a debate group on an issue like, I don't know, like reproductive rights, and just turning towards all of the people who have uteruses and saying all of these issues that you claim to suffer from with reproductive health care and being denied it, none of them exist. It is all in your head. You're just angry because of, I don't know, fucking penis envy or whatever. And then saying, I want to have a productive conversation. Yeah. That's what you're doing. And then you're whining when people like get the slightest bit testy with you of that. It's like, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? How are you getting away with this? Do people not see what is happening? Yeah.
But with the unpacking, like, the main point here is Brennen talks about me being offensive. The fact is, gaslighting is not offensive. It's violent. You know, to constantly be told by thousands of people that you're imagining the traumatic experience you went through, that the hurt you've seen happen to yourself and your friends didn't really happen, that it's all just media literacy and everything like that, you know, that's part of a big system. It does slowly erode away, like Seth mentioned earlier. Like, you end up going back and reviewing the original things and going, holy shit, there was more here than I remembered. Because it works. That's what the really terrifying thing is. It works. It erodes part of your fucking humanity. You know? It's stripping you away. Yeah, okay, a wave on the beach on the rocks may not seem to do anything, okay? The rocks seem to be all fine and everything like that, but when it's constantly going, it's eroding you. It is grinding you down, turning you into sand, you know? And that's what's happening here. For Brennen, okay, maybe he walked in on this. Maybe it was a landmine he didn't realize existed. But for us, it is ongoing trauma. Okay? This happens all the fucking time. You know, we have been dealing with a rash, especially recently, of very bad faith, what did Natalie ever do questions on Twitter. And like the example I mentioned earlier, there are half a dozen trans people Jewish people, black people, you know, explaining in like response to that, explaining the harm caused. And the very same people will ignore that and then just side with the first person that comes along and says they have nothing. You know, that's the situation we're in. So
How many of those people, I've seen a lot of those threads, they almost always, and when I say almost always, I mean like every single thread I've seen, they always have an opinion formed already. It's extremely clear. They will be like, oh, well, that's just bad faith. And use all these like little buzzwords and whatever that are like directly from Natalie's defense videos and, you know. So yeah, it's like ironic because you're calling other people bad faith, but you're actually concerned trolling people. You are baiting us into interaction, and then you know, to seem reasonable and to have this cover, and it's like you had an opinion the whole time. You concealed it. Yeah.
I've actually got the original note here of what Brennen said exactly in relation to the racist Lindsay Ellis video, and that is, quote, "I was really critical of this video when it first came out, but now I get it. Please watch it." Like, if
say you saw that video and you sided with it, did you have to like put your public stamp of approval on it though? Like maybe that made some points that resonated with you. Definitely did not for me. But you know, if that's the case, why do you have to go public with it? If it was an apology, which it wasn't, then it's not your apology to accept. And you know, or like, oh, and maybe Brennen has talked about this and I'm just missing something, but you're like, oh, I was critical, but blah, blah, blah. Like, where were you critical? Were you critical in your head? And then when it comes to be like where did you voice those concerns? Like, who did you support? Like, did you show solidarity with and, you know, quote unquote stand with any of like the Southeast Asians, including Black Southeast Asian mixed people who were getting dogpiled, who had to delete their tweets, who, you know, were put through this? Did you stand with them? Did you voice that publicly? Right? Like, yeah.
The whole thing is just a big fucking mess. And of course, like, yeah. At that point, it just sort of fizzled out with them because I was just like, you know what? I'm fucking done. But people weren't done with me. That's when Mo turned up. Again, just so we're clear, I had not tagged Mo, I had not mentioned Mo, I had not said anything about Mo. Mo comes out of nowhere and comes at me and makes the argument, what was it exactly? So I should be clear, Mo, they, them, turned up arguing that me comparing Calvin's abuse to Natalie's abuse was sick and that it, quote, downplays the horrors, end quote, that Calvin's victims went through. Reason I can't give you the exact quote is because Mo went through and cleared everything away. We'll discuss why I think Mo cleared everything away later, because it's very interesting. It's not quite what I was hoping for. And in response to this, Seth responded with, quote, "I literally had the N-word in my notes, suicide baiting, Nazi dogpiling, etc. because I said that Contra was racially stereotyping and she decided to set her fan base on her for that." So that should be on, okay, I guess it's on me for that. "Despite me having her blocked and not tagging her. I'm sorry, but I think that's a pretty big deal. You'll love to center yourselves in issues when you're the least impacted, but downplay the violence inflicted on black and brown trans folk. And yeah, it absolutely sucks major ass when white trans kids gets to play up and center their trauma, only to do this when we ask for some support on our issues. It's all Black Trans Lives Matter in bio and shit until we talk back. You don't get to build entire media personas around white trauma and then use it to punch down. Calling that out as hypocrisy isn't as half as manipulative as what you're doing here," end quote. Sorry I butchered that there a few points. There is a copy, which also links to the thread, the original thread, in the agenda down below, just in case you need help as I'm reading it out. Is there anything you want to add to that? Any like secondary thoughts that you had?
Yeah, just one thing I think you reading that back, I will take back the phrase playing up that I think is inappropriate. And I was, emotional at the time. I was, this is like at the end of the situation. Yeah, it's not playing up your trauma to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's inappropriate to leverage it in a particular way that silences others.
Mo responded to this, claiming to have no knowledge of the racism, specifically in relation to AAVE. I remember that. And they began asserting that they were open to listening to what other people had to say, to which he responded with, quote, okay, so if you're legit confused, you may want to reconsider knee-jerk defending other white people without having the info or actually listening first then. I just got insta-blocked over this. There's no listening or uplifting going on here, end quote. And you attached images showing that Brennen had blocked you. And it's like the original tweets that we read out, that got you blocked. And I believe Mo responded to that. I can't recall if they...
I actually didn't see any follow-up just because
they might not have responded to that. But yeah, so is there any sort of final notes you want to add here? Mo's in the audience apparently.
Oh, lovely.
So, like, I don't know if you want to say anything directly now that you've had more time to think about it.
Yeah, so I get if you stumble into a situation that you did not immediately realize, you didn't immediately realize everything that was going on. You can't possibly read all of the replies. You can't possibly be on top of all of that. But calling people, like when you're coming in to defend your pal who's calling other people media illiterate, and then you can't even you're like apparently not even aware of like the racism and how major that has been. And also recently the racism with ContraPoints has been a really big issue. I know I'm going back to old stuff in the beginning of the stream, but it is really recent. And if you can't do that, don't step into the situation. That's it. And the response I got that's telling me about, I always do my best. I always try to uplift. It reads like a company email. It reads like a corporate email.
Brennen said the same thing, right? Like Brennen said the same thing, and they blocked you.
Yeah, it's like it reads like something that you go to someone's PR.
It's a package response.
And Mo, honey, I have anxiety too. Okay, like I get it.
I think literally all
everyone
of us have anxiety.
Has anxiety. I have like PTSD.
Like my mouth is like bone dry right now because I'm afraid of getting dogpiled again, to be quite honest, and I don't want to let that stop me from going on shit. But like, come on, this is really big deal, and like, just deleting all your tweets and not saying anything about it isn't good. Okay, so like say you had a reaction and you deleted all your tweets. Okay, revisit it then, apologize. And to be fair, I did block you at that point in the discussion. I was done, didn't want to deal with it. So but like, hey, maybe talk to your friend who you immediately jumped to their side. Then if you made a mistake, if you're characterizing that as a mistake, then start changing tack. Then it's not like, oh, oops, okay, so now I'm going to back off, right? If you have the energy to come into someone's thread where you're not being tagged, and you have the energy to start arguing with them, and that's fine with your anxiety, but then it's like an anxiety issue when it comes time to like apologize or maybe talk to your friend about listening and doing all those things like uplifting and whatever our voices, or like then do that then, right? You don't tell me that that's what you always do. Don't tell me that's what you try to do. Do it.
Show through actions. Yes, we can come back to all this at the end because there's actually some like evidence that suggests it's not removed because I was wrong. It's removed so I can rewrite what happened, and I've got evidence of that, which we'll come to later. Don't worry, Mo. I always supply evidence. Now, as for my response to that, I got stuck on the whole, it downplays the horrors. Because here's the thing, I was comparing what I thought were two similar experiences. A large content creator sent a fucking horde of abusive shits that forced some people off the internet, some people to like lock down, some people to change their details, some people just terrified to speak on the issue. Okay, that is what Natalie did. I compared that to what Calvin Garra did, because they are very similar. Okay? I never downplayed anything. But by saying I am downplaying by comparing those experiences, you are saying what happened to you, what happened to me, what happened to Seth, what happened to everyone else is somehow lesser. You know, it wasn't as bad.
There is one point on that, is I can see how it can look like it's not as bad, even though the effect, as you know, Seth explained to us, is very, very, very real and very, you know, the effect is just as bad. But the fact that these individuals were not broadcast individually to the entire public consciousness, people can maybe say that's what makes it worse, is that Paul Brennan was broadcast to Calvin's entire audience rather than just having the most hateful people in the audience go after them. Except Natalie did that too.
Yeah.
She broadcast Tiffany, who did not put anything online herself even. Yeah. She was just going about her day. A stranger filmed her so that she could be mocked online. And Tiffany broadcast this thing that should not even be online in the first place. So she literally did the exact same thing, and even arguably worse in that later on I'm going to talk about helplessness as like a theme in a lot of this stuff. Now, it does not remotely justify what happened, but Brennan did have the slight amount of dignity in the fact that this happened as a result of a choice they made. They did know on some level, if you put something online, there's a risk that people will do this sort of thing. It's not okay to abuse people online.
Yeah.
But if you get abused online after putting something on intentionally, there is that slight shred of dignity in that. This is something that I went into kind of knowing the risks. Tiffany had no such thing. She just was living her life, and now she is in the public consciousness as someone who had this really embarrassing meltdown, and people mocking as cringe.
Thanks to
Contra did the exact same thing.
Thanks to people like Contra, there were people who tried to get her children taken away.
Did you? I don't know if you're aware, but she did respond to her video.
She did,
being
yeah.
used.
For those who don't know, Tiffany Moore, you might have heard the reactionaries, including Galvin, talking about the GameStop trans woman who was repeatedly misgendered deliberately, and she got angry at that. She started yelling at the store attendant who was doing this and smiling and fucking smirking. It got shared. Do you remember those like 2014, 2015 SJW cringe videos? It got shared around in the exact same fashion. Blair White was doing a response, Rosa Dawn was doing a response, Arias Garcella, Calvin Garra, all these people. SJW cringe. Natalie came along and did the exact same thing. Painting a target on this woman's back, and again, people have tried to get her children taken away from her because of this. She wasn't an online content creator.
Okay, Mo, listen to me very carefully. Don't you dare use my words to defend yourself. I will get to you in a minute. Don't you fucking dare. None of what I say is a defense of you.
You know. So it's like, that happened. But like beyond that, I had my own response, of course, which I'll just read out as quickly as I possibly can. It is quite a long one. This is also where I discuss stuff that happened to me in February, which I've been on and off with, like, do I really want to talk about this, okay? So to quote, "It downplays the horrors you went through. Well, only if you consider the following to be trivial matters. Harassing dozens, if not hundreds, of MB folk, abuse victims, and victims of Buck Angel's pyramid scheme off the internet. Dozens more into silence out of fear of the retribution that would be rained down upon them if they dared say a word critical of Natalie or any of the other bread tubers. Sound familiar? Hard to say I'm downplaying a horror when Natalie has done the exact same thing. 2. I had to deal with a particularly spiteful little creature. You might know the name. Xanderholm. Yes, in defense of Natalie and his own transphobic history, which is tied up to his consumption of Natalie's media, he decided to try and exploit my advocacy of someone who grew up in a domestic violence refuge to armchair diagnose me, arguing that I too, by my history as an abuse victim, must be an abuser, all whilst being cheered on by Luxembourg. See, I was the experiment on just how much Xanderholm could exploit trans trauma and get away with it. And your little friend was there in the front row, clapping them on as they did. Be sure to thank them for that the next time you see them. 3. I was sexually assaulted in February by someone who had a position in a prominent Indian feminist organization. When I blew the whistle, numerous cases emerged of him doing the same to other trans folk and lesbians. Do you want to know his go-to argument when this all happened? That he was a victim of cancel culture, a narrative that Natalie popularized on the left after she stole it from reactionaries. So do tell me, because I'm genuinely curious, which part of me pointing out Brennan's hypocrisy in claiming I'm just stupid or media illiterate for taking issue with Natalie, gaslighting me on the reasons above, downplays the horrors they went through? Come on, be specific. Being harassed offline, effectively denying a sizable portion of trans folk safe access to community? Tell me, how does that differ to Brennan's case? The armchair diagnosing in Natalie's name, dragging up my most painful memories as a weapon? Or the way I can't even escape her harm offline, as the person who sexually assaulted me used her rhetoric as a defense. Come on, tell me. You who are so wise in the ways of tone policing. The truth is, not once did I downplay the trauma you lot suffered, not even in my interactions with Luxembourg. But the two of you sure have. End quote. And again, that is not a comprehensive list. Other notable issues, as discussed earlier, are the appropriation of African American vernacular English in order to disparage it, and her subsequent hostility towards the black community who called her out on her shit, her targeting of Tiffany Michelle Moore for reacting to someone repeatedly misgendering her deliberately, and the exploitation of anti-Semitism to sell merchandise to supposedly reformed Nazis. You know, how far do I have to go? How deep do I have to go to point out that this isn't trivializing, this isn't downplaying, okay? When you say I am downplaying by comparing these experiences, you are, in effect, saying what happened to me and countless other people doesn't matter as much. The only way you could downplay is if in your mind, your suffering was worth more. Okay? Or specifically, Brennan's suffering, because again, I tagged Brennen, not you. You turned up. You decided to kick the door down and yell at me about this. Okay? So, Mo, rather famously, ignored this thread completely. I had just opened up about so much of the trauma that I've been put through for the last fucking year thanks to Natalie, and Mo just ignored it. Okay? And here's the fucking thing that really started to get to me. Mo ignored it, and as we mentioned when discussing the response to Seth, started boasting in the fucking threads I could read, because they were giving me the notifications, that they're open to listening and having a conversation and all this, just rubbing the salt in deeper and deeper and deeper with every fucking time they said that. Because they weren't open to listening. I had a good faith response to them. Yeah, I was angry. I hope from the subjects you can see why I was angry. Okay? So, you know, when they made the excuse that they're not here defending Natalie's actions, I think, to Seth, that was another thing they said in their response to Seth. I pointed out, I stated, quote, "The reason you're here is to defend Brennan's choice to label Natalie's victims as blind and illiterate, tone policing people, pointing out his hypocrisy in defending an abuser that has done to many what Calvin did to him. You built yourself up on a lie, and now you punch down." And I attached an image of Brennan's original post so Mo could see exactly what the issue was. They responded to Seth, noting that they're willing to listen, so I replied to that. Still waiting a response to this, by the way. They also responded to a song called Kinga, in which Mo doubled down, declaring that it was horrific of me to compare the abuse Brennan suffered, thanks to Calvin's fanbase, to the abuse hundreds have suffered thanks to Natalie. They once again stated that they're happy to learn from their mistakes and listen to other people, to which I responded with, quote, "Funny how you don't actually address the evidence of how Natalie's actions caused the same sort of situation in spite of me repeatedly prompting you. You don't want to listen, you want to lie, to pretend like you give a shit about anyone but yourself." And I linked my direct response to Mo. To which Mo finally responded, not to my original thread, which argued my case, but to my calling them out on refusing to engage, whilst claiming they're happy to do so. They quote-tweeted the comment that I just read out, attempting to use their age as a 19-year-old as an excuse, asserting that they don't know what I want from them, even though in my original thread I explicitly tell them repeatedly what I wanted for them. I wanted an explanation. How was I downplaying anything? Now, at this point, I was furious. This person was clearly resorting to the same methods I've seen with reactionaries. They pretend to want to discuss, but they only ever respond to the most vague statements. Anytime you respond with something really solid and precise, they never respond. They just ignore it. And it's fucking tiring. So I stated, quote, "More excuses, how lovely. I literally told you what I wanted from you in the thread. The fact that you refuse to actually address the points made shows you know you don't have a leg to stand on. That the pain inflicted by Natalie is just as bad, perhaps even worse than what Calvin did. And you know what? Maybe you didn't know any of this. Maybe you rushed in without thinking, yet you're still engaging, still making excuses, instead of apologizing and retracting your statements. I am calling you out for your behavior." End quote. To which I linked the specific tweet in which I told Mo to tell me how I was trivializing Brennan's suffering when Natalie's fanbase did to hundreds of people is almost identical. The last thing I said on that was, quote, "Brennan chose to gaslight Natalie's victims, including those who went through the exact same thing as him, thanks to her. Nobody provoked Brennan in this. He chose to rub salt in and declare us blind and media illiterate, erasing our pain, denying our reasons, our autonomy. Tell me, how are you and Brennan any different to Xanderhol and Riley? Making every excuse you can to redeem Natalie, whilst her video, which caused so much harm to trans folk, black people, and victims of abuse and sexual assault, remains up. You're not. You're part of the same system." End quote. So that was the point that Mo responded by blocking me and removed all of their posts, responding to me. And I hoped, that part of me actually hopes that maybe that meant they were withdrawing from the issue, they were going to issue an apology. Even if they blocked me, oh well, I can fucking live with that. That was not the case. Mo shortly posted to their own Twitter, quote, "I blocked Ethel because I don't want to engage with someone who is making such inflammatory comments towards me, i.e. calling me a liar that doesn't care about anyone other than myself. I don't mind engaging with people who have criticisms of me. There's lots of times I make mistakes, but people were just saying things that were blatantly false. I never defended any creator's actions. All I said was I didn't think we should compare two creators in this instance. That, on its own, led Ethel making multiple posts about me, and quite frankly harassing me, demanding I respond. I'm sorry, but I don't want to engage with Ethel. I'm 19, I don't know how old Ethel is. 26. But I'm pretty sure she's a lot older than me, and why would I engage with someone who's attacking me anyway? This wasn't a conversation I wanted to have to begin with. Demanding I comment is weird. To which Brennen responded with, quote, seconded. Okay. First thing I want to note, blocking is fair. Mo blocked me. I have accounts that I sometimes have to use because I very often receive transphobic abuse. People block me and then keep it above, so they try to hide it from me, so sometimes I have to go out and look at things. I did not use any of those accounts to at Mo, message Mo, anything like that. I stopped all direct contact. You know, I do think there's a difference between directly messaging someone when they blocked you, circumventing the block, etc., versus using your own platform to discuss an issue, because again, this is a big issue. And the thing is, Mo didn't even just withdraw in total, because when Mo removed all of their posts, I was just going to leave them out of this show. I was going to leave them out of conversation entirely because they'd retracted everything. And you know what? They were out of the picture. I didn't care about them. It's only until they posted that thread to their own wall after they removed their tweets that I decided, you know what? They're in the show now. Because if they want to have their say, I'm going to have my say. So, you know, the thing is, they're lying about events. Mo states, quote, "This wasn't a conversation I wanted to have to begin with," end quote. The problem with that is, Mo came to me. Mo targeted me. Mo came to my thread venting about my pain, my trauma, and started downplaying what happened to me. Okay? You can say I'm interpreting malice where there is none.
I will fucking get to you, Mo.
I have a response
fucking
to
get
that
you.
if you don't mind me jumping in.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so there is this thing going on that I've seen throughout everything revolving around white content creators, and it's the assumption of white innocence.
Mm-hmm.
And leveraging like you're gonna come in here and bring up I have anxiety, like you're gonna come in here and emphasize I was overwhelmed, and you're interpreting malice and there is none. It's like this innocence and this I couldn't do anything wrong, and that's gotta go.
Mm-hmm.
That's gotta go. You might feel everyone wants to feel like they have the best intentions, but you know, if you're that person who, like you say you are, who always tries to listen and always tries to uplift more marginalized voices, and you want to correct your mistakes and everything, then what you're doing and evoking this white fragility and evoking this sort of innocence and victimhood is absolutely not that.
It's like the same as allyship. You shouldn't be the one running around claiming you do these things. Others should be pointing it out in your behavior. You know.
Seems like overcompensation, right?
Yeah. I should note that one of the people who has helped cultivate the narrative that has currently set the US alight in relation to trans athletes, who helped propagate the myth of the danger of trans women in sports, their original response to me, because I made an offhand joke about them being alt-light, because they stated, unless we do something, this will be the end for women's sports. I don't want to see a world in which XY chromosomes dominate women's sports. Because I made a joke about them being alt-light, they turned the entire conversation about, you're assuming malice on my behalf, even though I ended the video by stating, prove me wrong on this remark. And with you, I gave you the out. I told you. You possibly walked into this like a minefield, not realizing what you were getting into. Okay? I gave you that out. You could have removed, you could have apologized, left it. You didn't. You stated this wasn't a conversation I wanted to have to begin with, when you were the one who came after me. You came into my backyard, not the other way around. I didn't tag you, I didn't message you. Also, the term harassment is doing a lot of legwork. You were repeatedly responding to other people claiming you were open to listening, and you weren't responding to the core counter-arguments I'd made to your assertions. Okay?
Responding to other people on your thread, like that's a very important
Like,
detail. It was specifically on your like coming to your thread again and again and again, and then the fact that you were just responding to messages that you were getting,
yeah.
that you were getting notifications for on your thread, on your platform, on your timeline, apparently means that is, and that's ridiculous.
Harassment.
You know, if you are harassing them, that they must be harassing you.
I just the burden of what counts as harassment is like so selective, right? Like ContraPoints didn't harass me. I have people in Brennan's notes saying that, oh, well, ContraPoints can't control her fan base, whatever. Right? But you know, if you simply respond, and if you respond to that, if you criticize that, then you're doing the harassment. But you know, then someone responding to that again isn't, because it's completely subjective, and it seems like whoever is the whoever you like the most, whoever's your friend, they get the benefit of the doubt. And when there are social ties, these these sort of like soft power networks that I'm talking about, and these resource sharing networks and these little solidarity networks that are exclusionary, that are segregated, that it's not only a racial thing. There are other marginalizations at play as well. But the benefit of the doubt always goes to certain people.
It's a Darvo chain.
Yes.
Like, it's like, you know, everyone should probably know about Darvo on this channel. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. But it's like an endless fucking chain of it. You know, the original abuser is not actually the abuser, it's the person criticizing them. And then, like, it continues. The person criticizing the abuser is not an abuser, but, like, it goes on and on and on. It's just like, yeah. Again.
And I mean, like, everyone has walked into something, had said something too fast, you know, maybe operated on some bias, done stuff like that. But there's a point where it's like, okay, at some point you have to stop. I'm very understanding
because again
of that kind of thing, but like there's a point where you have to stop.
I responded, and then after I responded, they doubled down on their argument in the same thread. So it wasn't a case of they reviewed, they realized they're wrong, and they backed off. I could see they had ignored. They'd chosen to ignore. You know, it was who was the other person they responded to? I know they responded to you. There was someone else that I mentioned. Was it Kilga or something like that? Kinga. They responded to Kinga, and they just repeated their original argument, even though my response had been sitting there for at least a good 20 minutes. You know. So again, and the thing is, they brought up their age, as if being 19 is an excuse for this sort of behavior. Again, if they backed out, if they said they'd gone wrong and they backed out and I continued to go at them, okay, then they'd have an argument. I'm not letting them learn at that point. But that's not what happened here. You know, they were still downplaying the trauma of Natalie's victims. Like hundreds, thousands of people downplaying their trauma. They came after me. I saw someone, like, first of all, I didn't even know you were 19 when you came after me. All I saw was someone with 3 times the follower count coming after me on this. Okay? Trivializing my trauma. That's all I saw. So I stood my ground and I made a fucking defense. Okay? But one thing I don't think you've quite thought about this argument, because one of the defenses I saw of Calvin was that he was 17 when he went after Brennen. As for your anxiety and all of this, like, I know you also, I noticed, because I was doing a double check to make sure I didn't miss anything, I also noticed you posted that apparently you were couch surfing recently and you're going through a lot of shit. It's like, I'm in exile. I can't be with my fucking natal family because my fucking racist ass country won't permit my fucking wife to move there. I have to live in a city where every year, for about 5 months, my lungs burn from the pollution. Okay? Go watch the first TTA around October. I get a cough and flu there. I got tested. It thankfully wasn't COVID. I still had that cough thanks to the pollution until February. Okay? You want to talk about fucking hardships? We can talk about fucking hardships. The point is, I didn't bring any of that to you to try and say, well, you can't criticize me because all this is going on. Yes, I brought up the facts that someone who sexually assaulted me recently tried to use cancel culture, the narrative Natalie normalized on the left, as an argument against me because I can't even escape her if I log offline now. That's how fucking pervasive Natalie is in her power these days. Okay? So we can talk about hardships all day if you want, but what's that going to achieve? You were given every opportunity to out. You chose not to. You chose to delete and then try to rewrite what happened, claiming that I'd apparently come after you, even though I hadn't tagged you or anything. You didn't want it, but you're the one who came after me. You know? There's also the lying about, like, the opening to listening, the harm of Natalie's actions. All of these things were just fucking besmirched, smeared all over the place. So, yeah, I don't see the removal of your tweets as being something done in good faith. Okay? I see it as something that was done to help you create a narrative. So, yeah. Oh, like, there was another thing that actually has some specifics here. Mo stated that, quote, "All I said was I thought there were valid criticisms and contra, but comparing her to Calvin was poor taste. People were misrepresenting what I said, saying I was defending her actions when I wasn't. I deleted my tweets because I don't want to be involved in drama. It's bad for mental health," end quote. First of all, I never claimed you were defending Natalie. I stated you were defending Brennen, who was the person tagged at the beginning of the post, and you were there defending. So that's a complete fabrication, whole cloth. You've completely invented that in your post after you moved those tweets. And of course, none of your followers can go and check. They only have your word. And because I'm not assimilationist like you, I don't fucking bend to try and meet societal's ideas of the perfect victim. They're going to trust you. That's the way society is gauged in this abuse culture we live in. Okay? And you say that you're genuinely sorry. Okay, well, remove everything. Put up a fucking apology. You know, don't try and argue that I was saying you were saying shit when I didn't say you said that. Also, again...
try to talk to Brennen if you know, like, talk to your friends who are speaking over people of color and more marginalized people.
As for your terminology, the usage of the word drama, when I spoke to you about issues of mass harassment, armchair diagnosing sexual assault. Sorry, my fucking hands, I can't keep it stable right now. Saying that's drama? Do you know how much that fucking hurts? Okay? There's a reason on my Discord the D word is banned unless you're talking about theatre. Because we don't do that there. Okay? That's trivialization. That's what you're accusing me of. And you were doing it. Sorry,
Okay.
Sorry, yes. It's open thing now. That's all the quotes done, so...
Figure out what order I'm going to do this in.
Are you okay, Seth?
Oh, yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, so if you've watched an episode of the Trans Agenda before, you know that I am not usually this angry. And Ethel has talked about a lot of things that it is valid to be very angry about. I don't care about any of those. I am angry at one thing, and one thing only. I am seeing red. Nothing else matters to me right now. And I just need to figure out what order I'm going to tell it in to make this make sense. We already covered... Okay, so it's very tempting to do an in-depth analysis of Mo's posts, but the only things we need to know is that Mo decided to come to Ethel's thread and comment on it repeatedly. All Ethel did was respond, and all Mo had to do to make it stop was not even apologize, but just shut up. All they had to do was stop talking, and the situation would have gone away as far as Ethel is concerned. As far as getting responses, being called out, whatever, by Ethel. And despite that, they decided to put out an announcement saying they are blocking Ethel for harassment. Now, if you look at Mo's public statement accusing Ethel of harassment, the thing about that is it's a narrative. And I don't mean that in necessarily in the way of this has been maliciously, it definitely has been maliciously twisted. There are lies in there and stuff. But even if it were completely 100% true, it would still be a narrative, because all stories, even non-fictional stories, even what I am telling you right now is a narrative, because you have to choose which details you talk about, which ones you focus on, how you frame them. You cannot escape. You are telling a story. Yes, the stream will be up later. Now, Mo's story has 3 themes running throughout it. Is the lack of choice in, as they claim, being harassed, the vulnerability in being only 19, and also in the harassment they fucking lied about. And then, as both of these things imply, there's also the fact that they are complaining anyway, is harm. Lack of choice, vulnerability, and harm. And you can boil all 3 of those themes down to helplessness. And before I talk about how Mo has not only hurt Ethel, but also personally hurt me with this, I actually want to talk about the, I mentioned before, I am dealing with some direct abuse online, not as part of Essence of Thought, but me, a Levi called Bird. And I want to talk about that story to kind of compare and contrast between what Mo is claiming to have gone through and what actual harassment, actual abuse looks like online, okay? So this story, a lot happened. I'm hyper condensing this, but basically, I saw something that's really upset me. Was that coverage of Lily Orchard I talked about. There was bad coverage of Lily Orchard, and that really upset me as someone who was abused by Lily Orchard, and someone who I think all of my close friends have also been abused by Lily Orchard. Most of them have been directly, personally abused by her. And there was this bad coverage of Lily Orchard and her toxicity that really upset me, because it really felt like it was trivializing that abuse. And we really hate trivialization of abuse here, don't we? Now, oh, don't you fucking dare head out just when I'm getting... Piece of shit. I really hate you. I really do.
But they like to listen.
I hope you come back, because that's really disgusting. You have no idea how deeply you have hurt me. It is really disgusting for you to not only leave, but announce it just as I'm getting the chance to say my piece.
It's called callousness.
Disgusting.
I wanted to slide in a suggestion for a resource too, but if Mo's out, then I can't really do that. That you know, something that might have helped Mo learn, but oh well.
It's at their convenience. It always is at their convenience.
Their
convenience, our trauma.
For the rest of you, especially those of you who may feel like I'm being overly harsh, who may be turned off by how angry I've been, maybe now when I get a chance to explain, you will understand, and you will see, especially if you haven't watched a stream before, I'm not usually an angry person like this. I saw, you had better come back and watch this, Mo. You had better. You'd better come back, and you owe me a personal apology. I saw this coverage of Lily Orchard's abuse that really upset me, and I really needed to vent about it. And so I went on Twitter and I did a thread about it. Now, I was as vague as I possibly could be. I did not mention this person's name. I did not tag them in. I did include some details that some people who had seen the thing could use to deduce what had happened. And that I was talking about them. To deduce that I was talking about them, but like only if they had seen it, and these details were important to what I was complaining about. So I was not looking for a fight, I was just looking to vent. Okay? Now this person found my post, and they jumped onto it, and they weren't upfront about it, but they were just looking to force an apology and a retraction out of me. And they basically were like, you know, I think you got some things wrong. And I basically said, you know, there was this one tiny little thing where I did get it a little bit wrong, but other than that, no, I know what I said, I stand by it. Okay? And this person, in response, went onto YouTube, where it's much, 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 much harder to respond to people directly. And they spent, I think, more than half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that, dragging me in front of their entire YouTube audience by name, where they refused to show my thread, refused to show any of the statements I had made, and they criticized me for what I said in my thread, except it wasn't what I said in my thread. It was one thing that is technically a possible interpretation, but a very unlikely one that ignores several things, and then a bunch of complete fabrications. This person claimed I had a mental disorder, and they used their qualifications to lend legitimacy to that claim. And yeah, they did all of that. And this was all in retaliation to what was a slightly bruised ego. I did not threaten this person's career. I did not call them out by name. I was just venting in a way that very slightly bruised their ego when they saw it. And in return, now hundreds of people think I have a mental disorder. And I have had to deal with anguish. I've had to deal with fear and stress. And it has interrupted my mental health recovery. Because if you don't know, I have gone through an immense amount of trauma that has completely fucked up my brain. And I am still taking some very basic steps towards recovery. You know, I went through complete isolation for months at a time every single year growing up. That's the level of trauma we're talking about. And this shit interrupts my mental health recovery. So if we compare and contrast this person's treatment of me with Ethel's treatment of Mo, this person responded to a vague vent post I did, not looking for a fight, not seeking them out, the exact same thing Mo claimed to have been the victim of, versus Ethel responding to posts on her platform. This person publicly dragged me, accused me of mental illness for refusing to comply with my demands, versus Ethel letting Mo disengage at any time. This person refused to show what I had said and fabricated things about me whole cloth, versus Ethel responding directly to statements, being very careful to include as much context as, you know, if the original posts were up, we would have linked to them in the agenda. We always supply people's statements when we criticize them. This person muted and blocked me when they didn't get what they wanted. Mo was allowed to run around, you know, arguing with other people in the thread. Never stopped from that. It was all in their hands. They had complete control over how much or how little they engaged. And I think this is interesting, because if you then compare and contrast this person's treatment of me with Mo's treatment of Ethel, you see a lot more similarities. Responding to a vague post versus commenting on someone else's thread. You know, both of those going and talking to someone who was not looking to engage with you. Publicly dragging someone for refusing to comply with demands versus publicly accusing someone of harassment for responding to your comments on their posts. Refusing to show statements, burying the context, just flat out saying, I'm not going to show your Twitter thread on this, you know, public YouTube dragging, versus, you know, linking to those statements. Refusing to show statements, burying context. Versus, you know, deleting your tweets so that people cannot see the full context. Vague tweeting about it so that people don't know what happened. And then, you know, muting and blocking when you don't get what you want versus blocking and smearing when you didn't get what you did, when you didn't get the free reign that you wanted.
Just to be clear,
you are acting like the abuser in the story, not the victim.
Just to be clear, the vague tweeting was not about my name. I was named in Mo's thread. It's specifically about the context of, like, yeah.
But yeah, I messed up my notes and I tripped over some things. I'm sorry. Okay, so in this situation, what is the harm done to Mo? Bruised ego, anxiety from being in an internet. I get it. Okay, I'm also really young. I'm only 22. I was only 21 when I made my Twitter. I was only 20 when I started weighing in on the whole 2019 situation. So I understand anxiety from when you think, did I mess up publicly? Are people going to hold this over my head? Are they going to be angry? I get it. But that's it. It's the same anxiety that would come from messing up anywhere else in life, and it's not Ethel's fucking fault.
You're legally an adult. You consented to be part of the conversation when you came after me.
As for the harm done, well, you've already gone over the harm done to you, but is there anything else you want to add, Ethel, before I get into
I believe Seth has something they want to talk about, though. Sorry.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I'm just like really observing a lot of these, like, you know, like I noted earlier, these like sort of reflexing to fragility, and I really like think that I really want to just like say, hey, go watch, like there's a lecture that Robin DiAngelo gives on white fragility, and I know it's oriented around race specifically, which does play into this situation, but I also think it just like in general
Applies universally.
the tendency to reflect to like these fragility reactions is really just toxic and needs to be unpacked. And like, should I like drop a link in chat? I know like everyone
yes,
knows,
sure, go ahead. Yes.
yeah, everyone like knows Robin DiAngelo. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that. A lot of people know Robin DiAngelo. Not that many people have actually engaged with what she does. It's pretty simple. It's pretty like entry level, not super radical, not like super radical stuff, but it's really, really good. And if you're prone to having those like fragility reactions and tone policing and everything like that, please, that's just, you know, something I think you could learn from.
Thank you, Seth. One thing I will say in how Ethel is harmed, I do kind of need to set this up to explain how this in any way harms me. When Ethel gets smeared, it's not just like basic smearing, like it's smearing on fucking steroids. The thing about Mo's mistakes is they can basically be fixed by just apologizing or even just ignoring the whole thing and letting Twitter just bury it with time. But nothing Ethel does can ever be good enough once they are accused of abuse. And I have a case study for this. It's a time when they said something to Lizzie Lang during 2019. And what happened was Ethel said to Lizzie Lang to exit Woodford's Church of Transphobia, right? But because Ethel is not always the best with language, we know this, that's why I have a job here, they put the order of words in a way that made it sound like they were telling Lizzie Lang to exit the world, i.e. to kill herself. When someone said it sounded like that to them and they were genuinely harmed by it, Ethel immediately apologized and clapped and said,
first of all,
it was a mistake. Sorry?
That's wrong. First of all, when I woke up and I found out that people were taking this, I did think that a lot of people were being disingenuous. I did stonewall at first for the first couple of hours. I released a clarification, pointed out the greater context, said you can read it in the thread, and when you read it in the thread, it's quite clear what I meant. But as I talked to a couple of people who came to me, including the partner of someone who stabbed me in the back in that whole situation, and I saw that they had genuinely been hurt, I apologized, because regardless of my intent, it hurt people. And it hurt people on a very traumatic subject, and I was sorry for that.
Okay, my apologies.
I just had to clarify. Like, it wasn't so notable that immediately, like, oh shit, I fucked up. Like, yeah, there was that period where I was like, is this good faith? I feel like this is not good faith. But
okay, so the fact remains, at the moment Ethel realized that they had done harm, they apologized, even though it was a very honest mistake. This was not being hard-headed. This was not digging one's heels in. This was just a simple grammatical mistake that ended up being very unfortunate. And this is important because to this day, people are still accusing Ethel of telling people to kill themselves because of this. And just as an added extra little fuck you on top of it, people are not just, you can understand people maybe didn't see the apology or didn't think it was genuine. But they are not saying Ethel told Lizzie Lang to kill herself. They are saying Ethel told Rachel Oates to kill herself, just to make it seem worse than it was. Because these people are not taking genuine issues with bad things Ethel has done. They are just taking whatever they can to use as material to turn into weapons, just to excuse just abusing them.
That's what I meant by, like, I know, no matter how the show goes, no matter even if Mo says, like, they're sorry, people are still gonna see this as evidence.
Yeah, someone even
there's
brought
no
up
way
Rachel
there's no
Oates.
way we come out of this looking good. But that's the thing. I've just given up trying to hold my hands out to the wider audience and try to educate them. I've assumed the fact that it is now my role in life to be an effective punching bag and hopefully offer a safe community for people who have been gaslit by a lot of these people.
Someone
That's
also
my role in
brought up Rachel Oates because of this whole narrative of, oh, the evil mean lady is abusing children now. How first it was Rachel Oates and now it's children. And Ethel provided like very, very solid proof. Like literally Rachel Oates herself
told people Rachel Oates is someone with 100,000 subscribers. She shared private posts from a mental health trans support group to demonize its members. She shared private emails from Levi, who we didn't know each other back then. He sent her emails telling her, as someone who was part of her audience, he was afraid the fact that how transphobic were things were becoming an audience. She shared those emails deliberately, calling on her audience to like fucking abuse him, pretending it was about getting.
It wasn't just like we had the conversation, she realized it was pointless, and then she shared the emails for some. She immediately shared the first email claiming to look for advice on how to respond, but she had already replied.
And then, you know, this whole fucking thing continues. She's promoted and defended Rosa Dawn. She's claimed that Rosa Dawn's hatred of non-binary people is like a minor issue. It doesn't really matter. She still promotes Rosa Dawn as a feminist icon in her feminist video. Because she called on her 100,000 subscribers to circumvent my block of her, and I clapped back on my own damn wall, she flips the Darvo. She nuked me with Darvo. You know, she said that I'd been stalking, I'd been harassing her for months. I hadn't said anything to her for months. Her previous video had mentioned me, and before that she'd gone on a 27-minute rant about me on her stream. I hadn't said anything about her months. Levi, whose emails have been shared, he was waiting for me to pick up those emails and talk about the transphobia inherent with the fact that she was sharing a trans person's private emails to goad her cis audience to abuse trans people on site. He told me this after the whole thing. But
I wouldn't say I was waiting for you, but I was thinking like, oh, you're probably going to end up talking about this before I do.
But I didn't. But I didn't see them because I blocked her. I got away from her. But when she decided to call on 100,000 subscribers to abuse me, well, suddenly I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I clapped back on my own wall. But anyway.
But yeah, the point is, like, someone brought up Rachel Oates, and then when Ethel sent proof, like not evidence, proof showing that she was not the victim, and that like Rachel Oates was not the victim in this situation, that Ethel had not done any of these things. This person just said, I'm not going to let you distort my memories. And this was physical proof that had been sent to them.
The thing they said specifically...
Nothing.
The thing they said specifically was, quote, making ridiculous demands of a person who wants to be left alone by you, end quote. That's what they said about Rachel Oates. This is Rachel Oates in that post on the 4th of September. Quote, since EOT has me blocked, and I can't tell him how their words have hurt me, can someone please send him a screenshot of my thread and see if he apologizes this time? Like, you know, that's just not true. And,
you know, that extra rubs salt on the wound that Rachel Oates is being used to demonize Ethel for allegedly abusing, you know, someone who's too young. And you know why? Because when Rachel Oates shared my emails so that her audience could abuse me by proxy, I was 20 at the time. So how does that work? Is 19 is 20 the magic number where now that you have a 2 in double digits and like does that just mean that whatever happens, that's okay? Where was my outpouring of support? Where was the demonization of Rachel Oates when she shared my emails when I was only 20? When I had, I didn't have a 4,000 Twitter followers either. I think I had like 100 subscribers at the time, and I didn't even have a Twitter. Yeah, so where was my outpouring of support? Like, that's not Mo's fault, but it is the fault of anyone who buys in to that I'm only 19 defense. Anyone who demonizes Ethel because I'm only 19, who did not hold Rachel Oates accountable. What is up? What is wrong with you? But I'm getting very sidetracked.
I think we're
this,
going to.
Yeah, this has really, really hurt me.
Sorry.
No, Ethel. It's not your fault. It's their fault.
Anyway,
I don't want anything to be. This really hurts me. Because when you hurt Ethel, you also hurt me. Because, you know, this is surprisingly hard. It's not a secret that I care about Ethel, but I don't think people understand just how much. Like, when Ethel got COVID, for the first couple of days when I wasn't sure how things would get, whether or not this is going to be like a mild case or a severe case or whatever, I went to some really dark places, okay? I was asking myself, am I even going to, if something happens to Ethel, am I going to be able to survive? Because I thought the grief might actually kill me. I've been absolutely gutted with this pandemic, not being able to visit. It's just pain almost all the time that I'm fucking stuck here. I know I'm very lucky to be in a place where we have, you know, no community transmission. We don't even have to wear masks and stuff. But I am gutted that I'm stuck here because the borders are closed, that I can't go and visit Ethel. And when I did some search, looking into this recently, and I found out that once people are vaccinated, they might start letting us travel as long as we're vaccinated. I might be able to visit sometime in 2022. I physically felt a weight lifted off my shoulders that I might only have to wait another 1.5 to 2 years instead of 3 or 4 or 5. These feelings, they run deep. And so when you choose to lie about my friend in a way that will hurt them, I shouldn't say friend, because Ethel's much more than that. Ethel is family, okay? They're not like family. They're not someone I think of as family. They are my family. This is exactly the same as if someone had gone after your mum or your brother or your partner or anyone like that. When you choose to lie about Ethel in a way that to smear them, to do something that will cause people to turn against them, that hurts me immensely because I am physically in pain. I'm physically stressed and worrying and afraid. I'm worried, how is this going to impact their livelihood? Will they be able to eat if this keeps happening? I'm worried because I have to spend time keeping track of all this shit. I have to keep track. I feel like I have to keep track of the shit people are saying and be informed. I have to try, and when I'm struggling, I feel like I have to try and pull myself together so that I can provide support, like emotional support. This interrupts my work, not my work on Essence of Thought, not even my work on a Levi called Bird, not even like my work studying to learn more editing. Like, this interrupts the work I have to do to access supports for my disability. I had this very detailed assessment done on my disability, right? And they rate between 0 and 100% how much disability you have. You want to talk about vulnerability. I was scored at having 50% disability. And when this shit happens, it makes it harder for me to access my supports, to try and get the help I need to get out of this abusive house I'm in, to get the help I need to learn the skills I need to be able to survive on my own, to do things like manage a house and cook myself food. It interrupts my mental health recovery. I have been taking some massive steps recently over the past week. For years, I've not been able to, like, I've noticed that I had not been noticing how I was feeling. I just didn't notice because of all the years of being expected to just cope with things with no support, without showing any emotion. I noticed that I was just ignoring everything I was feeling. And in the past week, I started taking steps to actually notice and articulate that to people. And I was making so much progress, like years and years and years of not having the skill. And within a week, I was getting it. And all of that has been interrupted by this. For the past like 3 days, I have not been able to work. I have not been able to, do anything for my mental health. I've not been able to do anything. And the worst fucking part is if I try and jump to Ethel's defense, then people rewrite the narrative. Isn't just that, Ethel is abusing children. It's that Ethel's setting their editor on people to abuse children, even though I didn't fucking ask. I didn't ask because I'm not Ethel's property. I'm not a fucking chess piece. I see this shit and I get scared, and then I just go and try and do what I can, just hoping will a counter narrative mitigate the damage. And then what happens is people turn around and they write this narrative. Now Levi's abusing people, and it makes it worse. And then I have to deal with the guilt of that. The guilt that I hurt someone I love. And, this whole thing comes back to this. This whole thing is about helplessness. That's that's the undercurrent of all of this is helplessness. Just imagine how fucking helpless you would feel if someone went after your mum, your dad, your brother, your sister, your cousin, your partner, anyone like that. And anything you do to try and help not only makes it worse, but makes it your fault that it's worse. Just imagine the helplessness of that. Unlike Mo, I can't just disengage either. You might say, oh, if the internet is causing you this much stress, then just get off the internet. I can't. Because this isn't about the internet making me stressed. This is about Ethel being hurt making me stressed. And even if I delete all of my social media accounts and I don't use the internet outside of using Discord to keep in touch with my friends, even if I did that, I would still be aware that Ethel is being hurt. The only way I could make this end is if I completely cut Ethel out of my life. And I think the grief of that would actually kill me. And, if the really bad faith, horrible people out there, they want to come in and say, well, Levi, you should invent a time machine and make sure that you never meet Ethel. The thing is, the really sad thing, I am better off in this situation. I am better off dealing with all of this stress and all of this pain and all of this worry and just constantly thinking, who is going to hurt my friend this week? Who's going to come after my family this week because they can't deal with some fucking basic criticism? Because I was in such a dark place. I'm actually better off now. I shouldn't have to choose between this and worse because you just pieces of shit out there don't want to deal with basic accountability. You want to go on about, oh, you're 19? I am only 22. I am disabled. I am living with abuse. I am recovering from abuse. And I'm constantly fearing for my fucking family because of people like you. All you had to do was shut up, and that would have solved all of your problems. Now, it wasn't good enough for you. You had to hurt Ethel, and you had to hurt me. I think it comes out now.
Seth, are there any final thoughts you have?
Yeah, I think
for a while.
Sorry.
It's not for your fault. I'm like, sorry, it's not your fault. I'm not blaming you. Don't apologize.
Okay,
we don't do that. I'm the one who apologizes.
There is one final thing, I think. Okay, there is a small part of me that does want Mo to suffer for this, but realistically, I don't want, if they are genuinely going to take down what they said, if they're genuinely going to apologize, if they're genuinely going to try and undo the damage, I don't want their life to be ruined over this. I don't want people to mistreat them because of this. If you want to tell the truth of what happened, by all means, don't go and mistreat them because of this. Though personally, I don't think I will ever be able to forgive them. Even I can fully believe this was just an impulsive mistake made by a scared young adult. I don't care. I cannot personally forgive this. There's one other thing I meant to say, and it's out of my mind now.
As a common friend would say, then it can't be very important. Sorry, Seth, you were going to say something. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I think just in general, whenever bringing up like an area in your life that like you think like, oh, I'm 19, or you know, I'm whatever, and you're bringing this into the argument, you always have to be aware that like other people exist, other people experience oppression. You are going to then, like, you know, if it's difficult to listen to somebody else talk about not like talk about their marginalization, their experiences, like you have to realize like you open that up because framed yourself as a victim and brought up a detail about your life. Now like other people are going to bring that in, and then that just like that's what the conversation just becomes about. And like, yeah, you just kind of can't assume that you're the only person who is like dealing with a power imbalance, you know, and like leveraging that. And yeah, yeah, that's sort of what I think. I am gonna head off though.
Okay. I'm actually questioning about whether I have the energy to do the rest of the show, or if we should schedule like a midweek show to like do the rest of the stuff. Because honestly, I'm almost dead from this. But thank you for coming on. It is really appreciated. I hope we didn't talk over you too much, and like you felt like you could have your say and everything.
It's all good. Thank you for having me too.